Man wanted me to flirt back, so I did. I'm a 25-year-old male to female trans woman that's been on hormone replacement therapy for 3 years now. My body looks naturally feminine. I have a feminine body, appearance, and voice. I work as a vendor for one of the major beverage companies. I was at a store and stocking shelves of my company's products, listening to music with one earbud, when a mid-30s-year-old bald man walks over. "Wow, girl, you are super thick. Wouldn't mind taking you home with me," he said with a bit too much confidence. I just continue working, ignoring him. He continues, "Oh come on, don't be like that, I'm quite large under these pants if you know what I mean. Something a sweet butt like yours needs." I continued to ignore it, getting very uncomfortable. That's when the music turns to the theme from Halo, and he says what I needed. "Come on, cutie, say something to me." Inspired by the music, I instantly had a thought. It hurts a lot to do a masculine voice, but I needed it. I looked at him with a very enthusiastic smile, and he looked like a kid in a candy store, bouncing a bit. I took a deep breath and went, "Oh boy, I actually got one too. Might be bigger than yours." And then, in the deepest, most masculine voice I could muster, I said to him, "You're cute as well, sure I wouldn't mind having my way with you." Afterward, I started coughing, my throat hurt so much, I was worried the voice sounded too fake, and it wouldn't work, but it did. The dude jumped back a good foot and yelled out, "Oh hell no. EFF this. Nope, hell no." He ran out of the store so fast, constantly looking over his shoulder as if I was following him. The store workers around me were laughing their asses off. One came up to me and asked, "How did you do that voice? I could never get mine to sound like that." "Oh, you're trans. That makes sense." I got complimented by a girl that wasn't my mom. Let's FING go. Was sitting at a restaurant, phone in hand, scrolling through Reddit, leaning back on my chair. Other hand covering my stomach. Waiting for my food. I was wearing jacket and jeans. Mind you, I am a short fat dude just sitting and minding my business. Two girls were going to the receptionist heading my way. I looked at them for a microsecond and back to my phone. They both turned to the receptionist, but I heard one of them whispered, "He's cute L." I was like, what the F, but kept my cool. I think she wasn't talking about me, but the receptionist was a girl. There were no other dudes in the restaurant and the girls weren't holding phones. So that means I just got complimented. Big W. After that they left and I finished my lunch and went back to my room. The end. My awful stepdaughter almost got me arrested because she thought it would be funny. So I flipped out and canceled the wedding. I got engaged to my fiancée about 3 months ago. We've been dating for almost 3 years and she has 2 kids from a previous relationship. I get along really well with the 12-year-old boy, but I have always struggled to build a relationship with my soon-to-be stepdaughter, Riley. She has made it very clear to me, my fiancé, and her bio dad that she doesn't view me as a parent and doesn't want me to try and be a father to her because she already has one. I was okay with that as I didn't want to force myself into her life. But deep inside, I am hoping that she will accept me soon. Anyway, a few days ago my fiancé sent me a text asking me if I could pick up Riley from school because she had something come up at work that was going to keep her late. My fiancé usually picks up Riley once a week and brings her to a chiropractic appointment to help with a sports injury Riley got. She told me she would call the school to let them know that I would be picking Riley up because I wasn't on the approved pickup list yet. However, when I got to Riley's school, it quickly became apparent that my fiancé forgot to call the school. The school has locked doors that require you to have a code or be buzzed in by the office. I buzzed into the office to let them know I was there to pick up Riley and that my fiancé should have called to let them know. They didn't know anything about it. I was left waiting outside for 5 to 10 minutes while they figured it out. I tried calling and texting my fiancé but she didn't answer. Then, the school resource officer, an actual uniformed cop, came out and told me that I would have to leave and that if I refused then he would arrest me for trespassing. I tried talking with him, but he kept saying I was not authorized to be on school property and had to leave. I had no choice but to leave without Riley. Finally, an hour later, my fiancé called me back. I explained what happened and she apologized for forgetting to call the school because she got distracted with work. She told me she would figure it out and meet me at home. When she and Riley got home, Riley went straight to her room. My fiancé sat me down and told me that Riley had lied to the office and told them she didn't know who I was and had never seen me before. She thought it would be funny. She told me she explained to Riley how dangerous that was and was going to work with Riley's dad to figure out a punishment. I did not take that news well. I admit I did raise my voice to her. I didn't yell, but I did get louder than I usually talk. She told me to calm down and I told her that I wouldn't calm down because her daughter almost got me arrested. Not to mention that she thought it would be funny. I told her that she was just as responsible for this as Riley because she didn't call the school and it put me in a position where I look like a creep or predator. My fiancé thinks I am overreacting and that I need to let her and Riley's dad handle this. I packed my things and told her that I needed time to think about our marriage since she thought that what her daughter did was okay. Since then, she has been texting me nonstop saying that Riley is just a child and doesn't know what she is doing.
Mother-in-law and father-in-law picked all my cherries. My husband and I live on a big piece of land, and I've been super into planting and gardening. Stuff like fruits and berries that you can harvest later, and even sunflowers. I like to trim my trees every season, and I check them a few times to get rid of bugs. It's like a calming thing for me. I grew up in the city, so I've always wanted to do this. I even talk to my plants and trees, it helps with my down days and worrying. Sort of like how it keeps me grounded, you know? It sounds crazy, but it somehow makes me feel not crazy. My cherry trees were doing really well this year. Big, awesome bunches of cherries. I put up nets to keep the birds away, and they were leaving my cherries alone. No major bugs bothering them. I watered them a lot during a dry spell in June when most plants were struggling. They made it through and did really really well. I was so happy with my little cherry trees. I had everything ready during the week. Got my ladder. Grabbed my buckets. Got my canning stuff out and all clean, and even had freezer bags ready to go. I planned to spend the whole Saturday picking cherries and maybe some of Sunday if I needed more time. My job was really tough all week. I even got really anxious at work because of the stress. It's been a rough time. So on Friday, I woke up early, checked on my cherries, and couldn't wait for the day to end so I could get started on things. When I got back home, I told my partner that I was going to make a quick dinner and then head out to pick cherries. And then he told me, sure thing. Mom came by earlier and took some cherries too. I felt like my stomach turned into a knot right away. Those cherries were my hard work, my reward for all the care and effort I put in. I spent years taking care of them, trimming them, making sure they were healthy and happy. I went outside, and even though the nets were still there, all the cherries that I could reach were gone. Every single one. All 4 trees were almost empty, except for the very tops. I started crying. I threw my bucket like a little kid throwing a tantrum. I was so angry. Those cherries were supposed to be mine. I went inside to my partner, and he asked me what was wrong. I told him that all my cherries were gone and then that his mom and dad took them all. He called them right away, and I could hear them talking on speaker. He asked them why they took all of my cherries. And you know what they said? They took them because they thought the cherries were ripe and ready to be picked. They figured I didn't want them since I hadn't picked them yet. Like, seriously? As if I put up nets for fun. As if I just left the ladder out for no reason. Like having buckets around just to give them some sun and fresh air. And guess what's even crazier? They have their own cherry trees. And apple trees. And other fruit bushes. When I brought this up, they said their cherries didn't turn out well this year. No surprise there. Their trees have had a fungus for years that I've been telling them to deal with, but they didn't want to trim their trees. So, they took my cherries instead. My partner's mom had already frozen most of the cherries, given some to her friends, and made canned stuff with the rest. I managed to pick what I could, and I ended up with just one ice cream pail of cherries from all 4 trees. I can't even explain how crushed I felt. I cried again on Saturday as I put away all my canning stuff, realizing I wouldn't need it for the few cherries I managed to get. I don't think I've ever been this angry before. My partner's mom has done things in the past that I could handle. I worked through those moments. I could almost forgive her or at least feel sorry for her, for wanting attention or affection from people so badly. Just writing this down makes me upset. My trees mean a lot to me, you know? I've taken care of them, looked after them, talked to them, and I was so excited for this year to finally pick a big harvest that I worked so hard for. Even though my depression and anxiety tried to tell me I wasn't good enough to be a gardener, that I couldn't do it, I proved them wrong. I had this amazing reward waiting for me, with beautiful weather on the weekend, and happy cherry trees that made me feel really proud. And then it was all taken away. It's not about the cherries, I just feel so defeated.
What is the most disturbing thing you've witnessed during school on school grounds? I went to high school in a very rural part of Pennsylvania. The seniors were allowed to drive to school and would get there early and hang out in the parking lot before homeroom. Well, one day a huge buck comes strutting into the parking lot. A couple of the redneck kids decide that they're going to kill it. So they get this deer cornered against the school and I swear on all things holy this effing deer jumps through a window and into a classroom. They don't let anyone in the school and call the cops and game wardens to get this thing out of there. Meanwhile it's bleeding everywhere because of the glass. So after about 45 minutes they finally get a hold of it and take it outside where it runs as fast as it can towards the woods. However, there's the main road through town before you get to the woods. As it's crossing the street it gets hit by car. It was a bad day to be a deer.
My husband's entitled in-laws accused me of being a gold digger because I was too poor to date him. I found the love of my life in the middle of a breakdown over my psychology final. I was a huge perfectionist, so I was basically sobbing in a study room. In the middle of my frenzied rants, I heard a knock on the door. In came this 6'5" god of a man asking if I was willing to split the room with him. At the end of that study session, I left with a newfound confidence in my psychology grade and a date invite. There was something calming about him, and when I went on our first date, I had a sneaking suspicion that he might be the one. Every time we hung out, I felt like I was on a high. Everything was funny, and I always left with a huge grin on my face. He made me feel special and smart, and he had a wonderful habit of calming even my most irrational fears. Even our intimate life was perfect. I always wanted to jump his bones when I saw his gray sweatpants, and he'd have a feast when I wore my sundresses. My friends even liked him, and they don't like anyone. But one morning, I woke up realizing I hadn't dealt with the red demon in ages. I instantly went to go buy some tests and check if I was pregnant and prayed that I wasn't. Well, I guess the world was out to get me because it was positive. I still had 2 years to finish my degree and about $2 in my bank account, and I knew my boyfriend would be in the same position. I decided to tell him that night, and what he said completely shifted our relationship. I decided to bring the test with me and slide it over to him while we were playing dominoes. He looked at me with pure shock in his eyes, but he wasn't panicked at all. He looked more excited than shocked. He hugged me so tight I thought the baby might suffocate and die in there. He told me he'd take the baby perfectly fine, and he'd make sure the baby would have a good life. I looked at him like he was crazy. How could he do that with no money and no degree? That's when he dropped a bombshell on me. He's a trust fund baby. This entire time, he's been rich and hiding it to blend in with everyone else better. I felt betrayed because we'd been dating for so long, and he had never even mentioned it. When I asked him why he'd hide this from me, he told me the truth. He wanted to make sure I loved him for him. I'm not going to lie. I giggled a little at that. He took one look at my smile, got on one knee, and said, "I know I don't have a ring, but I want to do right by you and our baby. Will you marry me?" It was so soon, but I knew I loved him, so I said yes. We had a small wedding and I met his family. They took me off guard right away because when I went to shake their hand, they flinched and put hand sanitizer on immediately as if I was dirty. I tried to ignore it and start a conversation, but then they ignored it and asked if I signed a prenup yet. I told them no, and they immediately started getting aggressive with me. They asked me if I was happy about destroying their family lineage and if I was planning on stealing everything they worked for. I just stared at them in disbelief and told them I loved their son for who he was, not his money. It didn't just stop there. For weeks after we got married, they would text me pictures from my own Instagram, asking me if I was tired of making my husband pay for my little play pretend outfits, even though I bought everything on my own. They even started judging me for my pregnancy choices. When I decided I wanted to test for diseases, they cursed me out for trying to unalive my baby. They even tried to call the cops on me for drinking a cup of coffee. When it was time for me to give birth to my baby, they tried to force their way into the room to start criticizing the way I was pushing the baby out. My husband tried to get them to stop, but they were harassing me when he was the most preoccupied. It didn't help that when I had my baby, I gained a lot of weight. During pregnancy, thinking that I could lose it all after childbirth, and I was wrong. Months after giving birth to my son, my body was still swollen and 50 pounds heavier than before. I felt like a prisoner in a shell because my self-esteem had taken a massive hit. My husband tried to get me to cheer up by inviting me on dates and initiating intimacy, but I was just so insecure that I refused to dress up and go out, or even let him touch my body. As a result, our intimate life devolved into nothingness. My hair also started thinning out, which made everything worse, and now I was even afraid to look in the mirror. My hormones caused my high school acne to come back, which was just the added cherry on top. My in-laws even started to notice, and they didn't let it go to waste. They constantly reminded me that I needed to lose all the extra weight or my husband would leave me for someone actually worth his money. They insulted me anytime I was at my absolute worst and I tried to ignore them, but I couldn't help myself and eventually gave up. I canceled my regular waxing appointments, had my hair in a dirty bun at all times, and wore my baggy clothes everywhere. I was ashamed of my appearance and tried to hide in plain sight, and it didn't take long for my husband to begin to notice that I was declining. After I hadn't washed my hair in 2 weeks, he sat me down and told me how concerned he was about me. He said all he wanted was for me to feel healthy and feel like myself again. He tried cooking me healthy meals as well as buying me new clothes, but it was no use. I still didn't feel good enough to put myself together. Meanwhile, my husband's help with the baby took a huge load off my plate, but we still had no physical relationship since I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. I started avoiding kisses with him and we just kept drifting apart. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. Just the sight of my body could make me burst out in tears. Any closeness my husband and I had was fading by the day, and we walked around the house like strangers drowning in our own stress, alone. A couple months after giving birth I was venting to my friend about my marriage and body issues, explaining how lost and undesirable I was feeling. To my surprise, she revealed that she went through something similar when she had her youngest. I asked her if she ever found some sort of solution. She calmed all my worries and settled my confusion by recommending Collagenic Elite pills. She started explaining to me how she tried everything to lose her baby weight, but as soon as she started taking the capsules regularly, it fell right off. When I looked it up to buy some of it, it seemed super promising and popular and I ordered some for myself. I remember feeling hopeless when I hit checkout because if this didn't work, I knew my marriage was as good as dead. I was still my usual depressed self, but somehow my saggy post-pregnancy belly started shrinking. Somehow, I dropped 3 pounds in 1 week, and as my body adjusted to the capsules, I dropped 5 pounds the following week. 3 months in, I realized I had shed a whopping 30 pounds. I continued to take the Elite pills and was shocked when I started feeling a sudden difference in my hair as well as my nails. I started getting my natural nails done weekly, and it slowly helped me get back into all my other abandoned beauty routines. I couldn't believe the difference the Collagenic Elite pills were making. Even with zero makeup I felt confident since my skin was clearing up and I could pull off new voluminous hairstyles. These small changes made me feel more like a woman, and someone my husband could be proud of being with. When we laid down for the night, he would run his hand through my hair and tell me how soft it was, and how happy he was that I was taking care of myself again. He told me how much he had missed seeing me smile. His in-laws even noticed, and texted me threats of suing after I posted myself because I supposedly can't get plastic surgery. After committing to using the pills regularly, the rest of my fitness routine came naturally. I began going along with my husband at the gym, and it became an amazing shared hobby for us. This, combined with the pills, made it possible for me to drop more weight than I expected. It was so noticeable my husband asked me what my secret was. Him asking me that made me feel like I was becoming an entirely new person. I was no longer that chubby girl his parents made fun of me for. I was stronger, both emotionally and physically, and I was prettier. I told my husband about the pills and eventually started taking them as well. Working out and cooking healthy meals together bonded us in a whole new way. It felt like discovering a new love language. We were both slimming down and doing our skincare routines side by side every night. I was finally feeling like my old self again, better. In fact, my husband became increasingly affectionate with me, and as I repaired my self-esteem, we repaired our intimacy life. We had been married for almost 10 years, but now we were connecting in a whole new way. My husband had dropped his dad bod belly, and we could barely keep our hands off each other. I was in disbelief that this new dreamlike chapter in our marriage had all started with pills. We were suddenly staying up all night together just to make love and talk about nothing. After combining the obvious elite pills with a new gym routine, by the time my son was 2, I was in the best shape of my life. I ran almost every single day and my skin cleared up significantly. My hair grew so much that it fell past my waist, and gave me a huge confidence boost. And even better, my in-laws noticed a difference in how happy my husband was as well, which made them become sweeter to me. Living through such a difficult body-altering pregnancy, as well as my awful postpartum, made me lose so much hope, and I was constantly scared of losing my family. Yet, with this new change, I felt at peace knowing I never had to worry about that ever again.
Today I effed up by meeting a girl who made me doubt my long-term relationship. My story is so cliché it hurts to write it. But I do need advice. I, 30M, have been in a relationship for 4.5 years with a girl, 27F, that I love. Nothing is ever perfect, but overall we have a good relationship. First 9 to 12 months were great, even though there were some painful points. At the time I thought that was perfectly normal and that we would work it out. Well, we didn't. Time passed and the painful points remained. They're even stronger in some cases now, but I thought we would find a solution. I started to believe that relationships were about sacrifice and commitment, so facing our problems would work out. Now I'm 30, spent the last 5 years getting my shit together, matured, changed jobs, found a fitness routine I like, and went to therapy. I grew a lot, and she didn't. I thought she needed more time, that I should do more, but everything is more serious now. The next steps are buying a place to live and having kids pretty soon. I feel like time is playing against me. I intended to wait a little longer even though I knew it wasn't wise. But every time we'd have a talk things would not change and I just hurt her. So I stopped and thought I was the problem. I should focus on myself and try to be better for her. And then I met this girl. We met at a friend's birthday party about 2 months ago. We instantly liked each other. Fast forward to now, I've seen her a couple more times, so many birthdays in summer, and we constantly chat. I know she is very much into me, as I am into her. I think about her all the time. She went on a road trip and I can say that I miss her. The farthest things have gone is when she kissed my neck when saying goodbye. I feel bad writing this, but this has made things so much harder. Here is this amazing girl and she wants me. It made all the doubts I had for the past 3 years bubble up on the surface and I don't know what to do. My current relationship is not great. But it's good. My girlfriend has her default, but so am I. Am I wrong for feeling like I want more from my love life? I'm very good at preventing myself from doing things, not so good at forcing myself though. I could stop talking to this girl. But should I? What is the best story ever told in a song? It was the most scandalous thing to ever happen in my high school. I was 16 years old, a junior, when it all started. It was just like any other day, until this new girl transferred in. Let's call her Sarah. She was a petite blonde, with a killer body and a flirty demeanor. Everyone was smitten with her, but she only had eyes for one person, our English teacher, Ms. Johnson. It was obvious from the get-go that there was something strange going on between them. They would exchange little glances during class. Sarah would make sure to sit in the front row, and Ms. Johnson would go out of her way to help her with her homework. At first, we all thought it was just a friendly relationship, but it quickly became apparent that there was something else going on. Rumors started to spread around the school that Sarah and Ms. Johnson were involved in some sort of romantic relationship. We all laughed it off at first, thinking it was just a silly rumor. But as time went on, the rumors started to get more and more persistent. And then, one day, it all came to a head. It was during English class, and we were all working on a group project. I was partnered with some of my friends, but I couldn't help but notice that Sarah and Ms. Johnson were working much closer together than they should have been. They were practically leaning into each other, whispering and giggling. And then, suddenly, Ms. Johnson's hand reached out and rested on Sarah's shoulder. I felt sick to my stomach as I watched the two of them exchange a knowing glance. It was like something out of a movie, except it was happening right in front of me. In that moment, I realized that the rumors were true. There was something going on between them. The rest of the school day was a blur. I couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was the scandal that was brewing in my school. And then, the next day, everything changed. I walked into English class, expecting to be met with the same tense atmosphere as the day before. But instead, Ms. Johnson wasn't there. And neither was Sarah. It was like they had vanished into thin air. The whole school was buzzing with rumors about what had happened. Some people said that Ms. Johnson had been fired. Others said that she had resigned. But no one knew for sure what had happened to her and Sarah. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I heard the truth. Apparently, Ms. Johnson had been caught with Sarah in a compromising position in the middle of the school day. It had all been caught on camera, and the school board had no choice but to let her go. As for Sarah, no one knew what had happened to her. Some people said that she had moved away, others said that she was still in the area but keeping a low profile. But then, one day, I saw her. I was walking home from school, and I saw Sarah walking down the street. She was wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, and she was walking quickly. I wanted to call out to her, to ask her what had happened, but something told me not to. I watched as she disappeared around the corner, and I was left with more questions than answers. What happened to Sarah and Ms. Johnson? Did they continue their relationship in secret? Did Sarah move away to start a new life somewhere else? I guess I'll never know. But one thing's for sure, it was definitely the best story ever told in a song, and one that will stay with me forever. Women, what's your everyday carry that should be normalized? I keep my flamingo in me everywhere. I take it to Applebee's, to class, bowling, jury duty. Literally everywhere. I don't care. My ex-boyfriend bought my flamingo a couple months ago because I was apparently hysterical. He figured that buying me a Soulmate Charms flamingo would straighten me out or something. No, Daniel, I was hysterical because I caught you cheating on me multiple times. Of course that would literally drive me insane. Girls don't ever put up with that kind of behavior. 7 years I put up with Daniel's shit. Nearly an entire decade. After I broke things up with him, I coped a lot by having organisms. If you know what I mean. I used to use the flamingo once a week, but at this point I don't take it out of me. I feel so broken sometimes, but I know I'm on a longer path of healing. When my friends ask what I'm doing on my phone, I tell them I'm on Insta or Discord, but honestly I'm just changing the intensity of the flamingo inside me. It gives me warmth and honestly makes me remember I don't need a man to give me pleasure. If you haven't figured out what a flamingo is at this point, look it up or talk amongst yourselves. I told my kids about my wife's infidelity. Me, 27M, and my wife, 27F, have known each other since high school. We were always friends, but didn't show any interest in each other until senior year. Where she asked me to prom, I accepted her invitation and we've been together ever since. We got married in 2015 at age 19, and have 2 daughters, who are 7 and 5. About a month ago, I found some texts on my wife's phone while she was in the shower. Where she had been flirting with one of her female coworkers that I knew pretty well. We had met at work functions from time to time. They sent each other explicit pictures and messages, and while I found no evidence of a meet-up between them, it was heavily implied that they had done stuff together in the past. The messages started about a year ago, so she's been cheating on me for over a year now. I sent screenshots of the conversation to my phone, and confronted her when she got out of the shower and she broke down sobbing, apologizing, saying she never meant to hurt me. I was seeing red at this point and decided to leave before I did something drastic. She texted me nonstop begging me to come home and talk, but I wasn't having any of it, so I stayed at my younger brother's, 24M, place for the night. In the morning I woke up to hundreds of texts and voicemails from my wife, begging to come home. Eventually I did come home, but only because she had to work, and there was no one else to watch my daughters. I told her to be gone by the time I got there, as I didn't want to speak to her, and when I got home, I sat my daughters down and told them that I was going to be divorcing their mother. They didn't understand what that was, so I had to explain it to them, and my heart shattered while I was telling them. My 5-year-old started crying, and my 7-year-old started begging me not to, and started asking me why I was doing this. So I showed them the pictures I took, excluding the ones with pictures, and they started crying even harder. I assured them that their mommy still loves them, but she hurt me very badly, and I can't be with her anymore. I also told them that I would still see them, and I would do everything I could to make sure of that. I texted my wife, telling her I wanted a divorce, and she needs to pack her things when she gets home. She fought it at first and begged me not to kick her out, but I wasn't in the mood for her bullshit. When she got home, my kids started crying and asking her why she did what she did, and she started screaming at me, telling me that I had no right to tell our kids, and that this matter was between us. I told her that since we're getting a divorce, they deserve to know why. She left in a hurry and took the kids with her. As far as I know, she's at her parents' house. My lawyer is in the process of getting the divorce paperwork in order, and I'm ready to fight for the right to see my kids. But they hate my wife right now, and refuse to speak to her, only to their grandparents, who have also stopped acknowledging my wife after they learned what she did. I feel I didn't overreacted, but my mind has been racking ever since. If anyone has any advice on what to do, please let me know. Who is the most badass historical character? Miyamoto Musashi. Undefeated in 61 samurai duels, the first of which he was 13 years old. He invented his own fighting style using both a long and short sword called Night and Ichi, meaning 2 heavens as 1. He once hit a sword master with his wooden sword so hard that his arm had to be amputated. He stood still in a sword fight against the previous master's brother so long that over an inch of snow built on the back of his sword, metal this time. He only moved when the brother's friend tried to sneak up behind him. He then unalived both of them with 2 swings. He unalived a monk who was a master of the long pole with his wooden sword. He unalived a master of the sickle and chain. When the master disarmed him, he threw his knife about 10 feet and hit in the neck. One of the only true sword masters to live to old age with no facial scarring. He was publicly challenged to a duel by a 12-year-old kid who was a relative of a man he had unalived. When he approached the field from behind, he saw 10 swordsmen and 2 men with muskets sitting in the tree above the kid. Musashi snuck up from behind, climbed the tree and unalived the musket men. He dropped out of the tree and unalived the kid who had challenged him and turned to battle the 10 swordsmen. It was during this battle that he was supposed to have invented his 2-sword fighting style. He escaped with his life and a large body count. A short while later at a bar, Sasaki Kojiro was insulting Musashi to the people of the bar about ending the kid. A stranger wearing a hat approached Kojiro as the crowd cleared. He lifted his hat to show it was Musashi, who sat in the back listening to Kojiro badmouth him. Musashi said he would unalive him one day. Musashi unalived him on the beach many years later. Musashi once unalived a samurai with his own wanted poster. Wanted posters were written on wooden boards like a for sale sign. Former undercover cops of Reddit, what is the craziest thing you had to do to not blow your cover? My friend who was an undercover cop said that multiple times he had to let himself be arrested to not blow his cover. Like when a sting was going down or whatever, instead of being like, hey, I'm a cop, he would get arrested along with everyone else. As a former correctional officer, we had a situation where a major police department planted a cop in the prison to get information on a guy they believed was orchestrating hits from inside the prison. The warden knew and I knew, by accident, but not a single other CO knew, nor did any of the staff, including medical, and that's the way they wanted it. He went through receiving, he was categorized and placed. It was wild. He was there for a week, got the info they needed and got him out. It didn't become public knowledge that he was undercover until after I had left, and it was a long while after, as they were making a case. That was a surreal moment.
Have you ever been treated differently in a store because of what you were wearing? This isn't my story, but that of a very good friend who I had as a roommate a long time ago. Jeff was a car salesman for many years. One night he came home and told me the story of his big sale that day. A man had driven into the parking lot in a beat-up pickup truck, one bumper tied in place with baling wire, rust all over it and a cracked windshield. He and his wife emerged from the vehicle and started walking around the show lot looking at cars and drifting towards the trucks. The man was very large, Jeff estimated 6 feet 5 inches and 280 pounds, and wearing bib overalls, a plaid flannel shirt, well-worn boots, and a John Deere baseball cap. All of his clothing was showing age, dirt, and stains. His wife was very plain and wearing similarly worn clothing, but neat, and she almost never stopped smiling. They walked around for about 15 minutes as the salesman watched them from the showroom. All of these guys were AAA personalities who were like sharks as salesmen and normally would have been fighting or drawing straws as to who got the next customer. Nobody wanted to go talk to these people, the very definition of hayseed goobers with big eyes but no money, and they clearly had nothing to offer as a trade-in. Jeff had just finished up showing a customer a few cars and writing up prices and a trade-in offer, and was irritated that the others had all left these people out there without even a hello. He went straight out and started taking to them. The man wanted to buy a truck to replace the one he had driven in on. He also wanted to buy his wife a car because their son had just run their old one into a telephone pole and totaled it. Jeff spent about 2 hours chatting with them, getting and giving information. He learned that they owned and ran a large farm with 40 horses, 80 head of cattle, other livestock, crops and side businesses running farmland that others had leased from him, and had about 20 employees working for him. When he got done and was writing up the sale of 2 brand new, fully loaded, vehicles, he asked how they would like to pay. The man reached into his bib overalls and pulled out a roll as big as his country ham fist and said, "Sorry, I don't have cash for both of them, but I'll pay for one with cash and give you a check for the other. The bank's open and you can verify the funds are there right now." So, because these people looked like dirt kicker rednecks to the auto sales staff, Jeff sold 2 top-line vehicles for cash, earned a very substantial commission, and made 2 acquaintances who invited him out to their farm to visit, and then became good friends for the next 30 years. I got to go with Jeff to their beautiful farm once, among the nicest folks I've ever met. Once you click, you can't unclick. I was 19 years old, I lived in Georgia, I felt lost, I was miserable. My stepfather made my life a nightmare, my mom was sick and in pain, my brother was a psychopath, and I wished every day that I wasn't related to him. If I could have snapped my fingers and not have him in my life anymore, I would have. My friends weren't really my friends, the ones I had were drama queens and fickle as could be. I felt alone. I dropped out of college, I failed a class, and instead of retaking it, I just left and stopped going. I worked at a Taco Bell doing drive-thru. The job sucked, but I got along with my coworkers. My car at the time was a 95 Ford Tempo. I paid $100 a month for it and it needed work, but hey, it was something. Although if I was being honest, I only worked because I needed a car and the job paid for it. I was an expert shopper, I worked at various places that paid in cash, so I needed a way to get to work. Hey, I could spend lots on unnecessary things and not even think about it. I shopped for clothes and makeup. I used to stay up nights watching Netflix and contemplating on ending my life. I'd Google the most painless ways to do so. I was tired of it all. I told nobody, why would I? Everybody would just make up an excuse for me. Maybe I was lonely, maybe I wasn't getting attention, maybe I wasn't feeling love. I thought it over a lot, but my senses would always kick in and I would let it slide. Sometimes I wished I'd go through with it and sometimes I wished I wouldn't. My mom and stepdad got in a fight one night. It was bad. It was the final straw. I was tired of hearing their fights, and then all of a sudden a loud bang. The screaming and crying. I couldn't take any more. I texted a friend of mine who lived down the street and asked if I could stay with them for the night. I was too scared to stay home. They said yes. I rushed over and then cried into their arms for hours like I've never cried before. They comforted me, and I ended up staying for about a week. My mom knew I wasn't home, but my stepdad didn't. I told my friend I'd rather move out and live on my own. They said yes. I quit my job and I moved away, 1,600 miles away to be exact. My friend's family took me in and I ended up sleeping on their couch for a month. I scammed my SSN and got a job at Pizza Hut, and then I saved for about 6 months and found myself a little apartment. I continued to scam my SSN, and 2 years later I was able to buy a car. I felt empowered. I was 20 and alone, but I felt on top of the world, like nothing could bring me down. I loved it. I was lonely, but I had my friends. I was a shopper, but I was working. I was still miserable inside, but I kept my happy facade. I kept it up till I moved to Arizona,
which was about 4 years later. I was always planning on going to Europe, but it was always so expensive. I never had the funds, so that's why I just stayed in and baked my years away. I was going to go to Europe. I knew one thing I had to do was get off my ass, get a job and save some money. I did both. I bought a cheap butt backpack, travel-sized toothpaste, soap, toothbrush and hair ties. I didn't bring too much with me, but I brought necessities. I packed light. The travel budget I had in mind seemed very attainable to me. It almost seemed silly that I shopped my entire life and that I could afford my dreams. But hey, I deserved it, as I thought. I couldn't get a flight until next month, so I had a month to sit alone, be alone, think and get prepared. I appreciated the time. I tried to focus and really find out the why I was going. Like why? Why was I doing this? I had an old picture of me and an old friend. He was an old best friend. We went shopping when we were much younger and we were happy. We were young and dumb. We were two people who were carefree and didn't care about the world around us. We just shopped and that was it. Sometimes I had regret. I always wondered how he was doing, where he was and what he was doing. I stalked his Instagram profile. I was in awe of the things he posted. Skydiving is one of them. He went skydiving. It filled me with so much envy. I wanted to quit my crappy job and go skydiving. He seemed so happy. He seemed reckless. He did a lot of stupid poop, but in the end he was happy and thought it was stupid. But that makes it so much better. My world seems so dark these days. I'm always lonely but try to look on the bright side. My favorite show growing up was The Fresh Prince. Some of the quotes stuck with me, but one stuck more than the others. Get busy living or get busy dying. I felt like I was dying. I had so much hate in me. My heart was cold and I cared very little for the things that I thought were important. I didn't want to raise a family. I didn't have siblings. I didn't have family ties, so the thought of it didn't mean a thing to me. As time went on, I started thinking of death a little less, but I never went too deep into it. I never planned. I didn't want kids. I didn't want to be in a relationship. I didn't want any of it. I just wanted to live alone and that's it. I'd go through shitty relationships because of how I felt at the time. I felt lonely. I would use men because I thought it made me feel better. It didn't. Long story short, I forced myself into a mindset that I loved being alone. It was perfect. It was me. That was all disregarded when I found out about this trip. It makes me afraid. I knew I couldn't go alone, so I begged my best friend, the same one I stalked, to come with me on my trip. He said yes and it made me so happy, scared but happy. I spent a lot of time with him. We even did some traveling of our own. He was my rock. After a while, he made me see things differently. I didn't care so much about tearing myself away. I wanted a family, but I didn't want a relationship. I wanted things to be okay. He made me see that. He made me think, rethink and rethink some more. Things just got better. We broke up, but the friendship still remains. It's funny how he made me see that I didn't know how to be alone. I wasn't good at it and I do too much. I rely on others to make me happy. I force myself to do things when I want to do other things. I like being alone, but I don't want to be alone. I ultimately didn't know how to control all of it. Now I proceed forward. I cried a lot on this journey. I miss him a lot. I miss my home. I miss the life I had, the clothes and the makeup. I miss all the stupid and unnecessary things I could spend my money on. But now I'm here. I'm enjoying myself, but I'm fearful. I miss them. But I know they're here in spirit. I sit behind my door. I look around at all of the stuff I bought. I hate it. All I want is to get home and go skydiving. I don't want that though. I want to continue on this journey. I want to shop in different. I want to eat different. I want to live. I want to take my time. I want to love. I want to be able to be the best me. I have to be. I didn't realize I rushed everything. Everyone I did it to. I know that now. I need to visit my mom. I can't go back home, but I want to. My heart really doesn't want to be on this journey, but I know I can't quit. I won't quit. I want to go through the troubles I face alone.
My lying best friend ruined her relationship with one joke. When my friend Sarah and I moved to high school, I started developing feelings for one of our friends, Oliver. I was so scared to confess because I was afraid of rejection. That's why I asked Sarah to ask him if he likes me or not. I remember waiting patiently and panicking. When Sarah came back, she looked disappointed and told me that Oliver said he only sees me as a friend, but what she said next shocked me. She said that Oliver confessed his feelings towards her and she didn't give him an answer because she didn't want to hurt me. I won't lie, my heart broke at that moment, but I thought to myself, this is my friend, I don't have to get in her way, so I told her it's fine and I will get over it. She smiled and hugged me. For some reason, I had a bad feeling in my stomach. I came home that day and cried myself to sleep. I felt jealous and envious towards them, but I never dared to do anything. My heart would break every time I saw them together, holding hands and kissing. I learned to move on, and in our senior year, one of our mutual friends, Mike, asked me out and confessed to me. By that time I had completely gotten over Oliver and only saw him as a friend, so I said yes. After many dates, I felt as if I had fallen in love with Mike, so I was really happy when he asked me to be his girlfriend. I never loved anyone the way I loved Mike. I'm happy that things turned the way they are because today, Mike is my husband and the father of my soon-to-be-born daughter. After our high school graduation, I went no contact with Sarah because each of us were busy with our lives. Mika and I went to college and graduated. Sarah went to a different college, but Oliver dropped out. He's working a minimum wage job and Sarah is the breadwinner for having a better, more stable job. Sarah randomly messaged me through Instagram and started talking about how she missed the way things were. She also congratulated me for the pregnancy. We started chatting and talking about our lives. To be honest, I felt bad for her. She was complaining that Oliver no longer pays attention to her or takes her out on dates. They've been together for so long and he still hasn't proposed to her. That's why I arranged a dinner for the four of us. Hopefully Oliver lights up after seeing his old friends. The dinner went smoothly. We were having a good time until Sarah started joking out of nowhere. She made a lot of jokes about how she played her part as Cupid and now I'm married to Mike. I didn't really understand her joke until she told me that she actually lied about Oliver asking her out and he had a crush on me. She twisted things so Oliver would be her boyfriend. My heart dropped and I could see Oliver's face changing. That was my first time seeing someone's face turn red. He looked Sarah dead in the eye and screamed, "Are you effing kidding me?" Then proceeded to storm out. Sarah ran after him so me and Mike just stared at each other in disbelief. The next day, Sarah called me crying about how sorry she was and how Oliver left her. She also mentioned how Oliver said a lot of hurtful things to her, including being useless and a rebound. Apparently, Oliver only started dating her to get closer to me, but after we went no contact, he just stayed because he didn't want to start over with someone else and also because Sarah provided a good lifestyle to him. I was disgusted with both of them and hung up on Sarah. Oliver tried to contact me but I blocked him. I didn't want anything to do with a person who would betray her friend like that or a disgusting user like Oliver. If you want the truth, I'm happy and grateful that Sarah did what she did. Otherwise I could have been the one in the toxic relationship with a jerk.
Teachers of Reddit, what's the worst thing that happened on a school trip? In the kindergarten field trip, we had the parent of our most challenging student come along as a chaperone. Her group was her own son, and a very sweet, obedient girl. Let's call him Jim and the girl Shonda. Typically we teachers set up base camp while the parents take the groups of students through the park. We do a scavenger hunt, and the parents bring us their cards for a stamp as they go through each section. The first time the zoo employee brought us Jim, he said that the boy was in the monkey exhibit trying to climb over the fences. Luckily he had on a school shirt, and Jim was brought right to us. We called his mother's phone, and she didn't answer. About 15 minutes later, the mom shows up and says, "Jim, how did you get in front of us? We were walking together just a minute ago." We teachers explained that in fact, Jim had been with us for a bit, and the zoo ranger had brought him over. No real response once from the mom. We asked her to turn on her phone. They went off again. The second time they brought us Jim, he had gotten into the fountain. It had taken several employees to chase him down as he ran and giggled. Same drill, we called mom. No answer. Jim was sopping wet with gross fountain water. He did not seem too concerned. The mom did not show up for 45 minutes. Again she said, "Jim, how did you get in front of us? We were walking together just a minute ago." This time I was watching Shonda. The look on that little girl's face said it all. Total amazement that an adult was lying. They went off again to walk to the picnic area. Yes. The third time the zoo brought back little Jim, it was with a police officer. Apparently, the zoo was watching the cameras, and the minute the mom was out of sight, she let go of Jim and basically ditched him. The mom got a citation for failure to maintain responsibility for her child and a 1-year ban from the zoo. The police officer accompanied her and Jim back to the buses and waited with them until it was time to leave. They did not participate in the picnic. Shonda had the best moral to the story. No wonder he is so bad, his mama won't even keep him safe when there is a tiger around. He is now a very troubled 4th grader. He doesn't get to go on field trips without one-on-one support from a school staff member. What feels illegal, but isn't. Okay, I gotta tell you all about this insane shit I witnessed the other day. Now, I ain't got nothing against the homosexuals, but what I saw was just crazy. So, I'm walking through the park and I see these two dudes going at it behind a tree. Now, normally I just mind my own business and keep walking, but something about this felt off. As I got closer, I realized there was a third dude watching them and jerking off. But here's the crazy part, he was stealing their wallets while they were distracted. I shit you not, this dude was watching these two guys while stealing their shit right out of their pockets, and they didn't even notice. But then, shit got even crazier. One of the guys busts a nut and suddenly they start fighting each other. Like, full-on punching and kicking each other in the face while still naked. And the dude who was stealing their wallets? He just stood there watching, laughing his ass off. It was like some kind of bizarre homosexual battle royale mixed with larceny and abuse. I didn't stick around to see how it ended, but damn, that shit was wild. I still can't believe what I saw that day.
My boyfriend invited his awful family who bullies and disrespect me to stay in our apartment. He broke down and cried when he walked on me moving out. Tyler and I were engaged 3 years ago. I ended things because of his family's contact interference. I returned the ring and tried to move on as best as possible. 1 year later, we started to talk again. I had already taken a new job that removed me from the area and I'm making 5x his salary. We decided to give it a try and take things slow. He moved to a town halfway from where I live now and after almost a year, we decided to move in together. He rented a place and while I didn't agree to fully move in, I would stay for 2 nights a week while working near his area. I also bought all the furniture and considered accepting my ring back. Everything seemed good until he lost his job. He became very bitter because he was not only passed over for a promotion but laid off. I had to help him with his bills, and I was okay doing it while he got back on his feet, but I noticed that he violated the boundary I had established with his family. Tyler started doing video calls and giving them virtual tours of the place despite me telling him that I did not wish to appear on camera. He used my phone to call them, and this made me very angry. I never asked him to cut his family off. All I asked was to never be forced to interact with them. I'd agreed that I would be civil and polite should there ever be a wedding, but there would be no phone calls, and I would attend 0 family functions. When we first dated, his mother never liked me and was incredibly disrespectful. She went from making faces of disapproval in front of me, pointing at me with her lips, to actively excluding me from conversations. She also ignored me the one time that I had invited her to our place. Things got worse when she blatantly talked about his ex, Nina, in front of me and didn't mind letting me feel that she would do anything to get them back together. Our engagement ended because brother-in-law was at our place. His then-wife kept calling him and he was ignoring her, so sister-in-law called me in tears and said he was bringing diapers, and 4 hours later, he wouldn't pick up the phone. I passed the phone down to brother-in-law and he yelled at her. I called him out for it, and we argued. Mother-in-law called me after that and insulted me. She said I had no business meddling in her other son's marriage and that she hoped her son open his eyes and leave me. I was still very confident in my relationship with Tyler and put her in her place. She started crying and said she wished her son would put cuernos on me, Spain slang for cheating, because he's fit and I'm a little chubby and I had lucked out. She never apologized and Tyler said she was his mother, and he couldn't do anything, and that she had been through a lot since father-in-law left her for another woman. The situation escalated and it got worse and worse. His family would intentionally show up unannounced at very late hours or call him extremely early in the morning. This stressed me out, and when I said they were no longer welcome, he tried to impose them on me, so I broke up with him. 3 months into his unemployment situation, I got lots of hostility from him. He was defensive and guarded his phone. When he took a part-time job and his weird behavior got worse, I feared he was having an affair, so I got into his phone. I know it's wrong. I found a long trail in his family chat. His mother trashed me like I was some loser aspiring to be her Dill, and his brothers made fun of my voice when I was angry. I stopped looking into his phone, but I felt deeply betrayed. Last week, Tyler announced that his family was coming to visit. He gave me no space to refuse and 0 time to process. I found it extremely weird that 6 people would take a 3-hour flight and had no idea of where they would be staying. We had a huge argument, and I was hurt to see that he just slipped into his old habits. He changes whenever we argue about his family and uses an emboldened demeanor. He shut down my objections by rubbing it on my face that it was his house and I needed to stop being so childish because if his family needed to stay over, we wouldn't turn them away. I have no proof of this, but I think maybe this is why he chose a 4-bedroom place. He said the extra beds that I bought would be great for inviting friends over. I never questioned him because I never thought I would end up having to help him pay his rent. I was not on the lease, but we were planning to talk to the landlord as our relationship seemed to have reached a stable patch. I cried all night, and he jolted out of bed and mumbled that I was a drama queen and that he was fed up. I've never felt so empty inside my heart. I had a mild panic attack, felt like my blood pressure was dropping while I got the urge to take off my clothes and start pacing, that I was able to control by lying down on my left side and applying ice to my forehead. I also had diarrhea and woke up in the living room, and he never asked what happened. After getting the silent treatment, I decided that this was too painful and moved out with everything that I bought. I didn't take any of his belongings or things I gifted him. I did leave all relationship mementos to avoid triggers, didn't go into absolute vacuum mode, and didn't take anything from the bathroom. Unfortunately, I didn't get to completely move before he showed up. He had some kind of a breakdown and cried and begged, but I had made my decision. He sent me a long text message apologizing. He also said that I imploded his life and his family's, which caused me to think that he might have thought of bringing them to live with him. I know it sounds far-fetched, but I don't know what to think. He started calling me a lot and it made me very anxious, so I told him that he's a lesson and I will never again date a man who's so far behind in his life that he needs to depend on the very same person that he mistreats. I called our relationship a painful mistake and told him that I hated him. His reaction freaked me out because he cried so loud that I had to hang up and block him. I'm haunted by his reaction. My mother-in-law wants to share my husband and I's bed when she comes to visit. My mother-in-law has always been really weird towards my husband. Whenever she's around, she's constantly touching him. Whenever she comes to visit, she spends the entire time holding my husband's hand and stroking his hair, and I have even seen her sit on his lap here and there. I never really brought up how weird I found her behavior towards my husband, since I'm not very close with my own mom and I figured maybe their relationship was more normal than it looked. But recently, she's gone way too far, and I wished I hadn't let all her past behaviors slip until now. My husband has never mentioned his mom being overbearing or overly touchy, so I was nervous to ever have to bring it up. My husband and I moved into our new house about 2 months ago. It's far from our hometown and my mother-in-law had a full-on panic attack when she found out we were moving far away from her. I listened to my husband reassure her again and again that she could visit and we would come to visit her often. Secretly, it was making my stomach turn to hear all this. I was happy to get distance from her since she has always been so involved in our lives. I wanted to start my husband and I's family in a fresh new area and not have his mom around every day. When we still lived in the same town as her, She would come over literally every single day, I'm not even exaggerating. My husband gave her a key to our old place without asking me, and she was in our house all the time. She even caught up being intimate once, and the next day she had the nerve to ask me to please act more ladylike. Lady, I live here, not you. She was already giving us so much grief for moving away, but her latest request is my last goddamn straw. I've officially had it with my mother-in-law to the point where I'm considering making my husband choose if he wants me or her in his life. My mother-in-law invited herself to come visit us the week we moved into our house, and my husband accepted without mentioning a word to me. He told me she was coming the day of, and I told him I was getting tired of him always putting his mother ahead of our marriage. He said that he was just trying to be a good son and that he loved his mom. I asked if he loved me too, and he just kissed the top of my head and hugged me to end the conversation. When his mom arrived that night, I saw that she had put her overnight bag in the master bedroom, where me and my husband slept. I told her I had set up the guest bedroom for her, and I tried to pick up her things to carry them in there. To my absolute shock, she just giggled and took her things out of my hands. She looked me in the eyes and said, "That's all right, I'm gonna be sleeping in here right next to my baby." Talking about my husband, of course. I couldn't believe she was really suggesting that she would sleep next to my husband in our bed. I hadn't wanted her to visit so soon in the first place, and now she wanted to share my bed? Instead of arguing with her, I talked to my husband in private and told him I was obviously uncomfortable with that and that it was time to set some much-needed boundaries with his mom. I wanted to cry tears of anger when instead, my husband said she would only be here for a couple of days and that we should let her share our bed since she was still adjusting to all this. I'm fuming. All this has made me realize that I married a full-on mama's boy who will always pick his creepy mom over me. I am not sleeping in bed with that woman. I decided to leave the night and I've been taking some time away from my husband while I reevaluate this marriage. He can stay there with mommy dearest since he seems to see her as the love of his life.
My brother pulled a horrible prank on my delusional husband. My husband refused to answer my calls while I was in labor and my brother played a horrible prank. Now my husband is furious I won't cut him off. My husband and I got in a fight prior to my daughter's birth a week ago, when he casually suggested a paternity test for our daughter when she was born. To be clear, this was completely out of the blue with no warning or reason. I'm a homebody who works remotely with no male friends other than my brother. I told him that he was accusing me of infidelity and he said he just wanted to be sure. And kept bringing it up until I told him, after 3 days of him asking and the stress starting to make me physically ill, that I didn't want to talk to him and left to my brother's house. I called him while I was gone and tried to work it out but he refused. After all this I went home the next day to grab some things while he was at work, and I went into labor. I called him 16 times. Before calling my brother who called him another half a dozen times himself while on the way to pick me up and then on the way to the hospital. It was a horrible and traumatic birth. I started crowning in the car and the doctor delivered my daughter in the back of my brother's van because I was too far along to move me, before rushing me in when I kept bleeding. It was horrible. I hated it all. My brother's wife who is a nurse even told me she honestly thought I wouldn't make it. I also opted for a hysterectomy as it came to that or something more dangerous. I only ever wanted one or none but my husband wants a large family. I'm trying to bond with my daughter but it's been hard. The point is that during this while I was returning from surgery, 10 hours after I called, my husband finally responded and asked why I hadn't answered his call. However, my brother had my phone and was so angry that he said "This is, Ops brother, I'm at the hospital. She didn't make it." And turned it off. My husband rushed over and got there when I had just woken up and started shouting until the security forced him out. And then didn't get to see our daughter until the next day because I was mostly asleep and apparently they needed my signature to allow him back. My sister-in-law thinks it was horribly cruel but that he deserved it. But my brother stands by his prank, and says that he only gave my husband 10 minutes of the same fear he had felt at my side for 10 plus hours. Whenever he sees my husband he also keeps telling him that I nearly died because we waited for him. My brother used to be mostly indifferent to my husband, but now he absolutely hates him. You can see it in his face whenever my husband enters the room. And he's been visiting a lot because he doesn't trust my husband to care for me while I'm still healing. My husband is furious that he won't apologize and that I won't make him and yelled at me when I said that the only reason my brother had my phone was because he wasn't there. I am trying to be empathetic. I know he feels guilty. I've spoken to my therapist and she says the apathy I'm feeling is likely general and not solely focused on him from lingering shock from the trauma. But didn't say much about the prank. My mother-in-law has been texting me to say that my family is horribly cruel for the prank and that I should go no contact with my brother, and now my husband is saying the same. I'm not in a good headspace. It's been hard to be in the same room with my husband and I've been sleeping in the guest room with my daughter. He brought up the paternity once and I just exhaustedly told him to either get out of my face or go stay with his mom if he's planning on stressing me out even more.
My husband chose his girl best friend over the birth of our firstborn child. He was bawling his eyes out when I did not let him see my baby. My husband has this best friend, Anna. They've been friends for a long time and dated years ago, mutually deciding that they should remain friends. I've had no problem with this relationship until now. On the day that I gave birth, Anna's brother got into a car accident. My husband got a call from her in the middle of the night and asked him if he could drop her at the hospital her brother was at, an hour away from us, since she was too scared to drive. My husband agreed, told me quickly while I was half asleep, and rushed out. A few hours later, I had contractions and called my husband but he did not pick up. We both knew the baby was due any time now, so I don't understand why my husband didn't have his phone on him. I even tried reaching out to Anna and she didn't pick up either. I gave up and called my dad, who drove me to the local hospital. I was so scared of giving birth alone since I've had about 3 miscarriages and 1 stillborn. My husband promised me that no matter what, he'd be there for me. Guess what? He wasn't. We called multiple times while I was in labor, and when he finally picked up my dad's call when I was giving birth, saying that he'd misplaced his phone in the chaos, my dad informed him that no matter how fast he drives anymore, he's going to miss the birth of his child. Well, my husband took that as, he's already screwed up, so it doesn't matter when he shows up at this point. When he finally came, our daughter was about 5 hours old and I'd already moved to the maternity ward. I refused to let him see our baby because I was so high on emotions and was shaking when I saw him and didn't want it to negatively affect my time with the baby. I wanted her birth to be a happy time and I was already struggling to feed her. My husband was in a bad state and told me to please let him see her, so I told him to stand by the window and hold the baby up. I told him to then leave and he'll be allowed to interact with the baby at my father's home when we're both well and out of the hospital, and that I was most likely divorcing him. He started bawling and apologizing and defended himself by saying that Anna's brother was in serious critical condition and that although he was fine, Anna needed him. He spent that time making sure that Anna was okay, feeding her, and then waiting for the brother to regain consciousness. I told him that I didn't care and that his daughter had already come second to him and all she did was be born. I'm putting my daughters and my health first and won't let her be sidelined. My husband agreed and left. However, Anna called me later and said that I was controlling and she'd never met someone as cruel as me for not letting a father see his baby. I told her that my husband made his decision and that this was his doing, not mine. Amid this whole mess, I realized I never checked on Anna's brother to see how he was healing because I was so irked by Anna. I called him and he said that he was doing well and will be out of his wheelchair soon. He had serious injuries, but most were concentrated on his legs and arm. He did have a concussion but gained consciousness soon. He asked about me and the baby, how I was doing with the split, and if I was okay with my husband and Anna. I can't believe I was so oblivious. Anna's brother kindly informed me that he and Anna's parents thought that my husband and I split when I was 7 months pregnant and that Anna and him were back on. He showed up at the hospital as Anna's boyfriend, which is why they didn't bat an eye that he was there and not with his pregnant wife. Because apparently, we split. Her brother's procedures were done well before the afternoon, so I don't know what my husband and Anna were doing for all those hours, but I don't even want to know. When I confronted my husband, he denied it. He said that our baby was his priority, that he made a mistake and that he was being dumb. Based on his guilty reaction, I concluded that all of it was true. I packed all of his belongings and threw them outside of our house. He was crying and begging me to please hear him out, but I said that I couldn't possibly give him that chance. I moved back to my parents' home and filed for full custody. Since then, my husband is blowing up my phone asking for forgiveness and he is saying that he doesn't want to lose me or our baby. I blocked him to not let him confuse my emotions. He made his decision the moment he chose Anna over the birth of his only child. Then, Anna made a call the other day and told me again that I was so cruel to take my child away from her father. I told her, "Aren't you a hypocrite? I can't believe you have the audacity to call me cruel when you are the one who deprived a child of her family by being a homewrecker. You can have my husband all by yourself." Until this day, my ex is still trying to reach me. I heard from a common friend that he and Anna were being shunned in their circle because the news got out. That friend told me that they don't know if they are still together, but my ex was trying to avoid Anna. Then, Anna was kicked out of their house because her parents knew. Despite all of this, I don't really care anymore and I wanted to focus on my daughter. All I can say is that I hope karma gets them good.
What is the darkest thing you have ever done and don't regret? My sister and I went to the same school. She was a year older. This guy was making her life hell and she was crying a lot, which was, still is, really, really unlike her. After weeks of this, my mom told me to beat him up and I would not be in trouble at home, if I got in trouble at school for doing so. The next day I saw my opportunity when I was in class and watched him walking in the hallway go into the guy's bathroom. I immediately asked for permission to go too. I opened the door quietly and he was taking a pee at a urinal. I Sparta kicked his ass into the urinal and then just beat the shit out of him, peeing on himself and all. I told him to leave my sister alone or it'd happen again. My sister came home happy that day and never had another problem. She didn't know this happened for about 20 years. Not a shred of regret.
My disturbing obsession with starvation is ruining me. How can I stop? Hi everyone, I'm a 16-year-old trans guy, and I wanted to talk about something that has been troubling me for a while. Ever since I was a child, I have had an unhealthy obsession with starvation. This obsession has even seeped into my intimate preferences, making me enjoy the feeling of being starved during intimate moments. I find that the emptiness and the presence of my partner intensify my pleasure, but the problem is that my partner and my family are unaware of my struggles and the toll it's taking on my health. To give you some context, I started resorting to starvation as a coping mechanism when I was around 9 years old. It made me feel more secure and less insecure about my body. While I wasn't starved as a child, I did face bullying regarding my weight, and things got worse when I turned 9 due to various difficult events. Despite being in a long-term relationship for almost 2 years, I haven't mustered the courage to share my secret with my partner. I'm scared that if I reveal the truth, they might be shocked, disgusted, or feel the need to take care of me. Although I've hinted at my struggles, I don't want to burden them with this aspect of my life. It's been a constant weight on my shoulders, which is why I decided to create this throwaway account to finally get it off my chest. Sometimes, I purposefully don't eat during my 10-hour school day because it strangely offers me a sense of security and comfort. But deep down, I know this behavior is unhealthy and detrimental to my well-being. I am trying my best to overcome it, but I need advice on how to approach this topic with my partner. I specifically mention my partner because discussing it with my family isn't an option. Thank you for listening, and I would appreciate any guidance you can offer. What question has someone asked you that secretly broke your heart? I was 22 and it was 10 p.m. at Walmart. I was on my way to a party and stopped for beer. The store was fairly empty, and as I was in the beer aisle, I see this kid completely by himself. He was about 5, and at first I thought it was kind of funny because he was trying to pick up a case of beer. I waited like 30 to 60 seconds, looking around for this kid's mom or dad to come get him. A couple people walked right by him like it was normal, so then I started getting worried. I picked up my 2 cases of beer and walked over and kindly asked him if he lost his mom or needed help. The kid completely ignored the question and instead was thoroughly impressed that I was strong enough to carry 2 cases of beer. Eventually an employee noticed and came over as well. I told her everything I knew and she took over and told him that she was going to bring him to find his mom. As he was walking away, he kept looking back at me and I smiled and said goodbye. The kid stopped and said, "Can I just come home with you? I don't like my mom." I was caught off guard, so I just laughed and told him the lady was going to help him. Now I'll never know the full story, or what happened to him, but the more I think about it, that kid more than likely had a pretty bad childhood. I mean, the store wasn't busy and it was late at night on a weekday. It really makes you wonder why he was there in the first place, how he got separated from his mom, and why would he ask to go with a complete stranger instead of worrying about where his mom was. It still makes me sad. Hope everything worked out for the little dude. I'm a trophy husband and I feel like I'm in a dream. I've been modeling for years and had moved into management when I met my wife Lily. I was managing the models for a high-end fashion show and we met backstage after the show. She was tall and was wearing a nice dress, so she stood out. I spoke to her and we liked each other. She was a nice but assertive and sophisticated person. We went on a few dates after that and she invited me to her home. I knew she was rich, but I was shocked when I saw her home. It was a massive mansion. I understood the scale of her wealth after that. Lily worked at her parents' business and it was their house. We kept seeing each other for a few more months. Lily told me that she married a guy she liked in college, but he started gambling and sleeping around, so she divorced him. They had a prenup, so it was hassle-free. She told me she stopped looking for partners after that. One day when we were at her home, she told me she was getting old and that she wanted a husband she could show off at events. She asked me if I wanted to be that person. I was caught off guard. She told me that I would get access to a lot of money and I could do whatever I wanted as long as it didn't affect their reputation, and I had to keep my bod looking good. I also had to sign a prenup. I asked her for some time. I grew up in a middle-class home and never had any money problems in my life. I had a good job, but the prospect of having a lot of money without doing anything was too good. Lily was a nice person and I liked her well enough, so the prospect of spending my life with her didn't seem bad. I accepted her proposal and stuff moved quickly after that. Her parents liked me and we were married in a couple of months. This was 4 years ago. I moved into her mansion and bought everything I ever wanted, but spending money got boring after a few months. I got bored doing nothing all day, so I took over cooking. I learnt different cuisines from our chef and occupied most of my days with that. Lily and I became great friends. She used to tell me about her day and I learned about the business from her. She'd take me to her events and parties and they were fun. COVID hit and Lily started spending a lot of time at home with me. We slowly fell in love. It's always funny to me that we fell in love after we got married. We are almost inseparable now. I spend most of my day cooking exotic stuff for her and she keeps buying expensive gifts for me and keeps taking us on vacations. We learnt that she's pregnant recently. I never thought I'd ever even see or experience even a quarter of the things I did in the last few years, and I keep feeling weird about it, like my life is some dream. My girlfriend and I went through something and now she is traumatized. I am mainly posting this to get you guys to maybe give me advice. Lord knows I could really use it. My girlfriend and I of 5 years went through a pretty bad event. It happened about 6 months ago, and I don't want to rush her recovery or make her feel like a burden, but I mostly just want to know how I can help her. To explain, my girlfriend is 20 years old, and I, male, am 21. I have a friend who is 27, but he wasn't ever really my friend but more really a friend of friends. 6 months ago, I had a severe argument with him outside his motel room. I don't know why he was in a motel room that day, but he is a really sketchy guy, so I didn't want to know. The argument was about how he kept making sexual comments towards my girlfriend. I told him I didn't like it, and he needed to stop. He would always say, she should be with someone like me, and what I would do to have her in my bed. He told me that I should just suck it up and be glad he was not trying to steal her from me. A little later, the argument gets more intense, and we are both about to get physical. My girlfriend came to check in on me since I left her waiting in the car, and I didn't think it would take long. This guy sees my girlfriend and laughs, takes her into his room, by force, locks me out, and opens the curtains. The entrance she took was behind the other guy, so he was standing between us. He's supermassive, and I can't stand a chance against him. I'm watching him throw my girlfriend on the bed and get violent with her as she's sobbing and fighting as much as she can. I'm screaming for help and trying to break down the door, but no one is around. After a minute, I eventually got the door open with a fire extinguisher in my hand, and the first thing I did was hit him as hard as I could with it over his head. To this day, I wish I could settle this with other people around. My girlfriend is okay physically. He had punched and hit her but was about to rope her. We called the cops and explained everything. After, I found out that I had killed him, but I wasn't jailed since I was found innocent of protecting my girlfriend. Now, 6 months later, I'm still shaken up by everything, but I can't even imagine how my girlfriend is. She is in therapy and support groups, but I can still tell she isn't okay. I want to be there for her. I love her so much, and it hurts that I put her in that situation. Even if it wasn't my intention, I didn't think about how anything could go wrong.
What punishment disciplinary method did another parent have that made you think you've gotta be kidding me? One day I was at the hair salon getting a cut and color. While I was under the dryer letting the color set, ha ha ha, a teenage boy prob 15, with the typical teenage hairstyle not too long not short, walks on with his dad. My hairdresser was a man and he said okay buddy. I can take you here. The teen sat down and my hairdresser said what are we doing today bud? The dad said give him a whiffle aka crew cut. My hairdresser said okay bud so you want a crew cut huh? How much are we talking, like a 2 on the side 3 on top or shorter than that? And dad said maybe I wasn't clear, shave it all off. Bald. My hairdresser's face dropped. The kid was just quiet looking in the mirror at my hairdresser. The hairdresser said excuse me? The dad said this kid doesn't know how to follow rules and keep his room clean so you are gonna chop off his hair. My hairdresser said no I am not. First of all I do not agree with your form of punishment which, in my opinion, is intended to humiliate your son, and if you want someone else to deliver your punishment then find someone else because I am not doing it. And he kicked him out. I was so proud of my hairdresser. I felt so bad for the teen but there was nothing he could do except shame the dad a little bit by refusing service.
Old lady tells me that it's good my baby boy passed away. To give you a quick rundown, not too long ago, my little baby passed away because his lungs weren't fully developed. He held on for 2 weeks, but about a month ago, my husband and I had to make the really tough decision to take him off life support. It's been really hard, and one of the things making it even tougher is seeing all the clothes and things we had prepared for him that he'll never get to use. So, my husband and I thought it might help a bit to return some of those things and donate the money to the hospital. It might sound silly, but we hoped it could help another child in need. We went to this big store in a busy shopping area in London, known for having older customers. We finished returning the items we brought with us, and on the top floor, there was a little cafe area. I needed to sit down and take a moment. I got a drink, and while waiting for my husband to get his food, I went to find seats. I had to pass by some kids' stuff, which I didn't really want to see. As I walked past, a lady, who I can't really call a nice person, grabbed onto my coat. I thought maybe my coat got caught on something, but she was actually holding onto me. I missed what she said at first, but she tugged on my coat again, pulling me towards her. She was really close, and I could smell her breath, which wasn't pleasant. I tried to pull away and asked her what she wanted. Here's what happened next, and I remember most of it because it made me really angry. She asked me where the small dresses were, and I told her that I had no clue, and that I would appreciate it if she let go of me. She then told me, with her extra rancid breath, that I shouldn't be so rude, and I reminded her that she was the one holding onto my coat. She just kept asking me the same question, and at that point I just tried to leave. So, I walked away at that point. I didn't care about that lady's behavior. I needed to sit down badly, as my body still isn't fully recovered. I sat down with my husband for about 20 minutes. I told him about the shouting, but I said it was nothing. Then, I heard some noise, and the lady was heading straight toward us. She put a small dress on our table, which landed in my husband's leftover food, and pointed at it. She told me that it wasn't so hard to find, and that I should have helped her find it quicker. Apparently, it was for her granddaughter and she really wanted it, or something like that. I told her that I didn't work there, and that I didn't care about her dress. Then, she said, well that's obvious now, I should have seen it before, it's obvious she couldn't tell what a child's clothes are from a badger. I admit, looking back, I got really upset. I had spent months picking out clothes for my son and loved doing it. I had just returned the outfit we planned for him to come home in. If we were returning anything else, I would be okay. But this lady said the wrong thing at the wrong time, and I lost my temper. I started kind of shouting and crying, telling her what we had just gone through, how lucky she was to have a child or grandchild to shop for. I was just blurting out words. My husband managed to calm me down until I was just crying. But credit to the lady, she stood there and listened to everything I said. After a moment, she said to us, maybe it's better this way for people like you. I don't know how my husband kept us both from losing control, but by that time, there was a crowd gathering and some store staff too. I don't know exactly what they said, but they took the lady away. 2 staff members stayed with us, and they sort of apologized. I can't remember the exact words, but I heard the word sorry. I just wanted to leave at that point. My husband started acting strangely upon my sister's pregnancy announcement. I feel like I'm going crazy here thinking about it. My husband and I were at my parents' house for dinner, all was going well, we were talking, laughing and eating, but as soon as my sister got from her seat and announced her pregnancy, I noticed at first that my husband got quiet, didn't get up to congratulate her since the rest of us did, and just kept staring at her towards her. I'm not entirely sure. I repeatedly asked if he was okay and he mumbled about feeling a bit sick. That was strange because he was perfectly fine that day. Literally, moments later he started throwing up, like I had no idea what was happening with him. He sat on the bathroom floor near the toilet just looking down and refusing to let me help him up to wash his face. I kept asking him if he was okay but no response. My family were worried about him and I had to take him home. I checked his temp and blood pressure, but all were normal. Still complete silence on his part. He went to sleep shortly after, and in the early morning at 5:30, I woke up to the sound of him crying in the shower. I rushed in asking if he was okay, but still no response other than tell me he needed a minute with himself. I almost lost it, demanding he explain what was going on, and he told me he was just feeling overwhelmed. From what? He's not the type who gets stressed out from work or anything of the sort. This is just so strange and out of character of him. He got dressed and left, then refused to even talk about it. I can't help but feel like this reaction was triggered by my sister's pregnancy announcement, since this is all started right after she made it. What makes me feel so horrible is the fact that my sister once implied that my husband was her type and hoped to get someone like him. She has a boyfriend, by the way. This could be nothing, but I can't shake this weird feeling about what happened.
What was a time where your instinct saved your life? This happened when I was 17 years old. Me and some of my friends were going over to a cousin's house near the countryside, only about a 2 hours drive from my place. We all agreed that I would pick up all my friends from their houses. Everything was peaceful on our way there. My 2 older brothers, Mike, 20M, and Michael, 24M, were coming along with us as well. Michael and Mike would drink with our cousin's parents, while me and my friend Stephanie, 17F, would hang out with our cousin and her friends. It was a mini party consisting of around 25 of my cousin, Mara, 17F, friends. Yes, that's a lot of friends for a 17-year-old girl, but at the time we were all used to over 50 people at gatherings. As expected, Michael and Mike got drunk, like I'm talking drunk so bad they couldn't even get themselves to the car, which was only parked about 5 meters away from the house. In the end, my cousin's parents had to walk them both to the backseat of our car while me and Steph got into the front. Me, being the responsible sister I was, decided to be the one to drive us all home. On our way home, we ran into the tree-covered track, which was surrounded by tall trees left and right. As we were narrowing our way through the thin gravel road, I suddenly heard a loud thud behind us. I jolted the car to a stop and looked in the rear mirror to see what was going on. There, lying on the floor, was a dog which looked something from a German Shepherd to a Border Collie. But there was no blood on the animal. Red flag N.1. Red flag N.2, my car had not hit anything and it had even been a clear road. Steph, being the animal lover, tried to get out of the car. I stopped her and told her to wait. For 5 minutes we sat there. Just then I saw a slight movement in the dog's tail. I slammed on the accelerator and sped up out of there. Steph started to scream at me, calling me heartless and names I cannot repeat here. She looked back at the poor dog, but that's when it all came together. Now the dog was standing on all fours and wagging its tail, and behind it were 2 men dressed in black coats staring at our car. I later found out that this is a way to get unsuspecting women to leave their cars so that their men can take them and do despicable acts to them and kidnap them and whatnot. My inconsiderate stepfather wants to invite his awful daughter and my sister's graduation, so I told them that we will go no contact if they ruin my sibling's special event. My mom and her husband have tried to coerce my youngest sister, 18 next week, to invite the husband's daughter to her high school graduation in May. My dad died when I was 5. Mom met her husband Jim when I was 8 and his daughter Layla was 6. Mom and Jim moved fast. They were married within 6 months, and it was just over a year after Jim lost his wife and Layla's mom. Layla hated it. She wanted to live with her aunt from the jump of the relationship and screamed the whole way through their wedding, which they went ahead with anyway. It was a total shit show. I had been so excited for Mom originally because my dad was a boss and I felt she deserved so much better. Jim decided we should do family therapy to try and work through things. So for 3 years we went in different combos. 2 years later Mom was pregnant with my youngest sister and things went to poop. Layla walked away from Mom trying to pick her up from school one day and told some parents that my mom was trying to take her. The police were called. CPS came. Jim got involved, and for 2 days there were questions asked and Layla was spoken to. She asked if she could live with her aunt because she wanted to, and CPS told her she needed to live with her dad. So Layla decided since that didn't work she would accuse my mom of not treating her right. Jim stood by Mom and CPS investigated, but all of us were taken into temporary foster care while it was figured out. I was placed with my brother and sister while Layla went to her aunt's house. Through the whole thing Layla and I were both interviewed countless times and my mom was cleared. But it was decided Layla should stay with her aunt while she and Jim went to therapy together. Jim saw her for 2-ish years until Layla told him she wanted nothing more to do with him. She also wished Mom. We also know from Jim's parents that she still hates Mom, me and them. But she moved closer recently and Jim has been trying to reconcile with her. Now he and Mom want to try and force this happy family dynamic on my sister, and she's feeling so stressed about it because she doesn't want Layla there. She asked me to speak to Mom, but Mom said I had no idea what I was talking about. So I told her and Jim when I saw them together that they didn't get to ruin my siblings' special events to get what they want and that they can make plans to meet with Layla without risking my siblings' feelings. They tried to say Layla is my sibling and our family too, and I'm being hard on them. I told them that they will lose me too if they proceed. Am I the a-hole? I am divorcing my crazy, gaslighting wife. For context, my wife and I have been married for over 25 years. She is 45 and I am 50. Event 1, last week she told me that she had to go to dinner with her coworker. She didn't want to go, but she had to go. I didn't think anything of it. Turns out, it was dinner at her coworker's house with her husband. I was a little miffed that I didn't even get an invite. But to top it off, she was there for 4 hours, until 12 a.m. It was not like they didn't have enough food, because she came home with a ton of leftovers. Just made me feel like I don't even exist and being excluded from her life. I find this to be both disrespectful and inconsiderate. Event 2, my wife's coworker, who is much younger than her, he's 30, has, according to my wife, been sleeping with her other coworker who is my wife's age. He's an attractive guy. Recently, I looked at her Instagram messages and this guy and her are friends. He has been sending her messages on Instagram with relatable memes. They come from a very similar background, almost every single day, and they engage in ha 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 banter. Sometimes multiple memes a day. Nothing sexual or off base, but I think this is totally disrespectful and inconsiderate. They are also Facebook friends. If the tables were turned and I did this with one of my 30-year-old coworkers, who was sleeping with a coworker my age, she would be totally outraged. Again, the fact that she doesn't consider how I would feel about something like this is troubling. Before anyone says hey you looked at the phone, we have an open phone policy. She can look at my phone all she wants. Event 3, she has a new coworker, and he was asking her for some advice, and she immediately texted him friend request me on Facebook. He's very young and fairly attractive. Recently she texted him from the gym with a code to join for $1 down. There was no other related text. It was as if they talked about it before. He didn't respond. Later in the week, she took pictures of him at work and sent them to him. Again, nothing sexual or off base, but under what circumstances would something like this be acceptable? If I invited my attractive young female coworker to join a gym and then took and sent pictures of her, I think my wife would be pretty upset. This is just a pattern of her not considering how I would feel about anything she does. Event 4, I have come to find out that she is trying to join a local lodge, which happens to be on the beach. In a text message to the lodge she said, "A friend and I are trying to join your lodge, but we're having some issues." I am not sure who this friend is, but she never mentioned this to me at all. It seems incredibly fishy that she would be joining a lodge without at least mentioning it to me. She joined their Facebook group, which is public knowledge, but that's very different from actually joining a lodge where people congregate, they serve food and have entertainment. I have confronted her on these things, and she just tells me it's no big deal. And that I am overreacting. She says, "They are just my coworkers in the lodge, I was going to tell you about that." When I tell her you don't consider me at all, I get no response. So, I have stopped talking to her and am sleeping in the guest room and considering divorce.
My Nepo baby husband didn't think that I was good enough for his rich parents, so I got pregnant and showed them that they couldn't. I found the love of my life while my coin slot was gushing Kool-Aid during my psychology final. My period was so bad that my no-no square had more flow than Kendrick's disses. I had forgotten all the material on my psych final because I couldn't stop thinking about how my cotton stick definitely got lost up there. I studied before and my tears were dropping onto the exam booklet. I was so nervous I could throw up. If I failed this final I'd lose my scholarship. Out of nowhere, a sticky note-paper airplane flew next to me with tiny answers to all the multiple-choice questions. When I turned to see who threw it at me, it was this 6'5" Nate Jacobs-looking man. At the end of the exam, I left confident that I passed and spent my entire afternoon talking to my new man. He made me feel special and smart, and he had a wonderful habit of calming even my most irrational fears, like Nikocado avocado. Even our intimate life was perfect. I always found him incredibly attractive whenever he wore his gray sweatpants. When I realized I didn't have my period for months, I was happy until I realized I could be sentenced to an even worse fate, motherhood. I instantly went to check if I was pregnant, and when I saw the positive sign, my mind went through the TikTok list of reasons not to have kids and sent myself to the heavens. I decided to tell him that night, and what he said completely shifted our relationship. I slid the test over to him, and he looked shocked but excited. He hugged me so tight I thought the baby might burst and croak inside. That's when he dropped a bombshell on me. He's a trust fund baby. He's been rich this entire time and hiding it to blend in with us working class folk. When I asked him why he'd hide this from me, he told me the truth. He wanted to make sure I loved him for him. He took one look at my smile, got on one knee, and said, "I know I don't have a ring, but will you marry me?" It was so soon, but I knew I loved him, so I said yes. We had a small backyard wedding, and I met his family. When I went to shake their hand, they jolted and put hand sanitizer on immediately as if I were dirty. I tried to start a conversation, but they just asked if I signed a prenup yet. When I said I didn't, they started loudly whispering that I was just going to turn their family into GTA club dancers. I tried to tell them that I loved their son for who he was, but they just started creating an entire plan to stop me from turning their mansion into a Heisenberg ad CT den. For weeks after, they started picking on me in every way possible. His mother even started claiming I had swallowed 3 dogs to pose as a pregnant woman. For reference, I'm Asian. His younger sister stalked my social media and commented that my toys must turn soft when they see me. They even tried to call the cops on me for drinking a cup of coffee. When it was time for me to give birth to my baby, they saw me accidentally poop the bed and claimed that it looked just like me. My husband tried to get them to stop, but nothing worked. It didn't help that when I had my baby, I gained a lot of weight during pregnancy, thinking that I could lose it all after childbirth, and I was wrong. Months after giving birth to my son, my body was still swollen and 50 pounds heavier than before. I felt like a prisoner in a shell because my self-esteem had taken a massive hit. My husband tried to get me to cheer up by inviting me on dates and initiating intimacy, but I was just so insecure that I refused to go out, or even let him touch my body. As a result, our intimate life devolved into nothingness. My hair also started thinning out, which made everything worse, and now I was even afraid to look in the mirror. My in-laws even started to notice, and they didn't let it go to waste. They claimed I must have hid babies 2 and 3 in there. I tried to hide in plain sight, and it didn't take long for my husband to begin to notice that I was declining. Every time I looked in the mirror, I started noticing every flaw they pointed out. When they told me they were considering entering me in my 600-pound life to earn some of my own money, instead of brushing them off, I just started tearing up and locking myself in the bathroom. My mother-in-law started sending me bags full of laxatives so that I could get rid of the rest of my baby weight, and she even made it a point to say that I only had a few months left before my husband would leave me for someone skinnier. I started avoiding the mirror, just in case I'd see the stomach they compared to a Big Mac. I started to shut down and started dressing like Adam Sandler. I stopped showering and washing my hair, and I stopped looking at myself entirely. When my husband would try to hold me at night, I would shrink into a little ball and avoid his touch as much as possible. His in-laws drilled the thought that I wasn't good enough for him, and I didn't want to spoil him with my nasty touch. My husband, being the absolute angel on earth that he was, took control of the house. He helped with the baby, helped me cook, and tried his hardest to ease my anxieties, but nothing worked. Eventually, I could tell he started feeling heartbroken when I let his parents' insults affect me so deeply that I would tell him to find someone better than me. He would tell me he wanted no one else but me, but he started drifting away from me, just like his parents said he would. Deep down, I knew he loved me, but I forced us apart, and we seemed more like co-parents than a couple. One day, I was hanging out with my friend in the most ridiculous oversized clothing to hide my overgrown body when she rightfully called me out. She noticed that I wasn't obsessing over my phone to text my husband, and I started to make a million fat jokes a minute. I basically puked out everything that happened since I got pregnant, and she told me that it was natural to feel lost after having a baby. She pulled out pictures from when she gave birth to her son, and she looked about 6'3" wide, which was completely different from the thin girl I know today. She told me that she felt at her lowest when she gave birth, but she used Collagenic Elite pills to help her lose her stubborn baby fat, and it came right off. She basically ordered me to get off my butt and stop choosing panic over my life. I went home that day feeling like there was a layer of grease on me, and I finally needed hand sanitizer to get rid of my in-laws' grease. So I planned it all out. When my in-laws went on their annual vacation to the Bahamas, I'd make them eat their words, and I'd get to keep my man. When I started out using the Collagenic Elite pills, I noticed my saggy stomach went away first. I lost 3 pounds in the first week, and the blessings kept coming, as I lost another 5 the week after. After 3 months, I lost weight faster than Eugenie Cooney, and came out 30 pounds lighter. I looked at myself in the mirror and knew that if I wanted to, I could be a GTA club dancer and succumb to my legacy as a gold digger with how good I was looking. Even though I started off to prove a point to my in-laws, I was happy I started taking the Collagenic Elite pills because I was prettier and felt free. Because the Obvi Elite pills had collagen, my hair even started looking silky, and my nails were finally getting long enough to wear those long nails most girls my age were wearing. I started treating myself for once, because before the baby, there was the panic from school, so I decided I deserved it. I started a beauty routine, went to nail appointments, I even got rid of the baggy clothes that made me look like a wannabe SoundCloud rapper. Even my man started noticing the difference, because he started sneaking up on me and whispering how much he missed me. I bagged him from Aura alone, and I was starting to realize that my in-laws were wrong about him. He needed me, and he showed it when he laid in bed, and instead of jumping my newly snatched body, he played with my hair and told me how much he loved me. Soon enough, when my in-laws came home, they started threatening to sue me because they thought I stole their Ozempic. My husband and I just laughed at them, while we made plans to go on a date together. He even asked me for my secret, and I tried to drag the reveal out for a while, but as soon as I saw his little grin while staring at me, I spilled. He decided to take some Obvi Collagenic Elite as well, and the change in him was insane. He became more fit, which made me want him to carry me with one hand and the other hand holding my newly developed body. My in-laws hated whenever my husband and I came around, because it was clear that we had a new type of glow. By the time my son was 2 years old, any type of insults they threw at me flew straight away. I even mustered the courage to block them and ban them from our house, to which my husband realized was the best decision. There was never going to be an excuse to bring me down again, especially with this new change. I was even thinking of buying my mother-in-law some Obvi Collagenic Elite too, because I'm tired of my steps breaking when she comes over to my house.
Am I the a-hole for telling my sister she's exhausting? Before I share the current situation, let me provide some background. I'm a 32-year-old woman, and my sister, who is 38, used to be both my best friend and my biggest bully. Growing up, she had a strong influence on me and constantly dictated my preferences and opinions. There was this one incident that sticks out in my mind. When our parents were renovating our house, I requested a purple room, but she demanded a green one on my behalf, and that's exactly what was painted. Nowadays, things have changed, and our relationship has improved significantly. We both live far away from our parents, so we decided to surprise them by organizing a family gathering. My partner and I, along with her and her husband and kids, were all going to be there. About a week before the trip, she messaged me, insisting that I watch a movie. I politely declined, explaining that it wasn't my cup of tea. However, she persisted, so I chose not to respond. Life continued as normal. When we arrived at our parents' place, everything seemed fine at first. My sister made a few minor comments here and there, but nothing too significant. That was until she decided to sign our parents up for a streaming service. She asked for show recommendations, but before I could answer, she snapped and exclaimed, "Oh, sorry, I forgot you have an opinion on everything. So sorry, op. I guess I'll just shut my mouth, right?" The room fell into dead silence. I couldn't take it anymore, so I stood up and told my sister, "My God, you're exhausting to be around. This is precisely why I moved as far away from you as possible. It's okay to have an opinion, but it becomes a problem when you force it upon me and belittle any other perspective." I then headed upstairs to the room my partner and I were staying in. He followed me and expressed his pride in my ability to stand up for myself. A little while later,
My dad came upstairs and informed us that my sister had decided to leave the next day unless I was willing to apologize for what I had said. My dad is fully supportive of me, but my mom, who prefers to keep the peace, wants me to apologize to ensure that her grandkids won't be taken away. So, I ask you, am I the asshole, am I the a-hole, in this situation?
My manipulative boyfriend led me on for months, so I got him addicted to me, and now he's obsessed and I'm leaving. I, 28, dated a guy for almost 3 years. I was in a long-distance relationship with this guy named Sam. I'm from the West Coast and he's from the East Coast. The first few months was great. We had so much in common, and to me it really seemed like this relationship was going to be serious. He was my first boyfriend. He supported me throughout my master's and my career development, and I helped him through major life changes that he was going through. I had always wanted a first and last relationship. I thought I had hit the jackpot with this guy. I travel a lot for my job. The company sends me out to different states to attend conferences, conduct training, etc., and most of these conferences are held in Sam's hometown. Even though it was a long-distance relationship, we would see each other more often because of the convenience of my job. I would stay in his apartment whenever I was there, and he would also fly to my hometown and stay at my apartment for weeks at a time. Everything was great until after our first anniversary. He started to become distant. During this time, I hadn't been able to fly down to his hometown because I was busy with training in our office. I never made him feel like he was less of a priority, and I would always text him throughout the day. Whenever we were together, I basically did what I thought a good girlfriend should do. I'd never had experience, so I just did what I thought was right, like giving him attention, making him feel seen and heard, being patient with him, allowing him to go out with his friends whenever he wanted to, etc. I really thought I was doing good for my first relationship. Until he asked for a break. I admit, I did beg and cry when he asked for it, but ultimately, I couldn't do anything and decided to accept it and move on. I was heartbroken, but I poured my attention to my job and eventually got promoted. 2 months passed and Sam reached out to me with a really long message. Basically, he was apologizing for the sudden breakup without an explanation, and he explained why he had to do it and that he loved me and he knew that he was wrong, but if I wasn't willing to give him a second chance, then he would just settle for us being friends because he said I was a great person and a great friend. My trust was ruined at this point, but I wasn't really mad at him, and I admit that I still loved him, so we decided on starting all over again but as friends. To make it short, we ended up dating again after 5 months. I really thought this was like his redemption arc and he'd be more attentive and loving towards me, and he was. For like 3 months, and then he started being distant again. I slowly noticed a pattern with his actions. I asked a close friend of mine for some advice, and she told me that Sam was breadcrumbing me. He would give me attention and love and then suddenly stop, so I would start to beg for more. After our second anniversary, we still kept our old anniversary date and celebrated that as our anniversary. He suddenly ghosted me. No message, no nothing. I was blocked on everything. I couldn't call or text his number. Nada. This time, I wasn't as heartbroken. Instead, I was contemplating what the heck this man was trying to do to me. He was toying with my emotions when all I had given him was genuine love. It started to piss me off, but again, I didn't want to do anything about it and just moved on. 3 months go by and Sam was back in my DMs. This time with a different message. He wasn't asking for another chance or anything, he was just explaining why he had done it. Basically, it was all bull explanations. He was leaving his old job and he got busy with a new job and he didn't have time for me, so he thought he'd get everything done before he would fly down to my hometown and reconcile. He asked if he could come and visit me and we can talk it all out. During this time, I had found out that during the time we were together, he was cheating on me, and apparently it didn't work out with that girl, so he came back to me. He had done this in the past as well. All of this was confirmed by a friend I had who moved to his hometown, who became my source of intel. This is when I felt a switch turn on in my head. I knew what he was doing, and instead of turning him down and just move on, I wanted him to feel the way I felt when he did all of this to me. I told him he could come and visit me and that I'll be waiting for him. At this point, I knew he knew I was acting out of character. He asked me if I was really okay with meeting him and talking things out, and I said yes. A week passed and he actually flew down to my hometown, and he had the audacity to come to my apartment and stay with me for 3 weeks. I welcomed him with open arms nonetheless. We talked and he apologized over and over again. He kept insisting that he wasn't good enough for me to give him another chance. He kept saying how much of an asshole he was for doing that to me, and I never deserved all of that. He would understand if I wanted to throw him out right then and there. I hugged him and told him that I still loved him and that I wanted to make things work between us. He was taken aback because he wasn't expecting this reaction from me. I told him that he was the only one who understood me and I never felt this kind of attraction with anyone else. He hugged me back and told me how much he missed me and how much he loved me. We agreed to spend the 3 weeks together rebuilding our relationship. For the next 3 weeks, I treated him like a king. Showering him with love and affection. Cooking for him, making all of his favorite dishes. We would go out on dates almost every night. I bought him video games that he liked and I would let him play all night while I sit next to him and just watch him enjoy himself. Pardon my language, effed his brains out every night. He would whisper words of love for me after we did the deed, and it was exactly what I wanted. 3 weeks was up and he had to fly back to his hometown. He couldn't keep his hands away from me the day before he had to leave. He kept telling me how much he wanted to stay and live with me. I played right into his fantasy and told him I wanted that as well. In fact, did not want that at all. I told him I'd come and visit him the next chance I get. When he left, I felt relieved. Faking everything was exhausting, but I wasn't done yet. We kept texting, calling and FaceTiming each other when he got back to his hometown. Something he rarely wanted to do with me before. I wanted to drive him mad. I wanted to drive him crazy, like what he almost made me went through. I started ignoring his texts and calls until he became desperate. I would make up some excuse about being super busy and that I would make it up to him. Next thing I did was to randomly post pictures of me and some male coworkers that would make it seem like we were on a date. I would post them on my IG story and quickly deleting it once Sam had viewed them. He would blow up and start calling me asking who that was and where I was. I would tell him, "What are you talking about, babe? I've been so busy I haven't even gotten the time to be on my phone," which is an obvious blatant lie, but the more I did it, the more Sam started to question himself. Started to question if he truly saw what he saw. He would apologize and admit that he missed me so much and wanted to be with me as soon as possible. He was slowly becoming obsessed with me, and that's what I was hoping for. It got to the point where it drove him mad whenever I started to act coldly towards him. I would always play dumb whenever he would ask why I was acting so cold. He would ask if I wanted to break up with him, and I would say, "Why would I do that? You're the only one for me." Whenever I would say those words, his face would go from relieved to worried in a split second. I kept doing all of these for months until the slight thought of me leaving him drove him insane. He once flew down to my hometown unannounced when I was acting cold towards him. He banged on my door at 10 p.m. and he only brought a backpack with him with a few clothes. He clung to me that night, and obviously I reassured him that I wasn't going to leave him, and I once again, excuse my French, gave him a effing of a lifetime. He had to fly home the next day, and I reassured him that I'll always be here for him. Little did he know that I'll be temporarily sent to Europe for a month-long training, and I'm not planning on contacting him. The moment I leave, I'm blocking him on everything, and I'll be deleting all of my social media accounts. Am I a psycho? Probably.
I'm letting my entitled sister marry her cheating fiancé even though I'm the only one who knows the truth about him. I want to share a story about my sister and how I feel about her choices. It might sound a bit strange, but please hear me out. My two younger sisters were often treated much better than me. I had to use their old school stuff, wear their old clothes, and even share my room with one of them who constantly took my things. She even broke my door once, and my parents didn't do anything about it. One Christmas, my youngest sister got a fancy mirror, my middle sister got a video game, and I got slippers. This kind of thing happened a lot. My little sister and I got along well, but my middle sister was often mean to me, both physically and emotionally. I couldn't even defend myself without getting in trouble. My parents believed it was easier to let her do as she pleased. My middle sister always found a way to make important events in my life about her. When I got engaged, she suggested we have a joint wedding, even though she wasn't engaged herself. She would do this with all my special moments, and my mom supported her. Now, she's engaged to her longtime boyfriend, but her behavior as a bride has been terrible. She's been demanding and rude to everyone, and most of her bridesmaids have quit except for me and her maid of honor. I felt like I couldn't quit because of the drama it would cause. Recently, she found out her fiancé was talking to other girls on social media, even on the day he proposed to her. He has a history of cheating on her, but she still went ahead with the wedding plans. I tried to warn her that a wedding ring wouldn't change him, but she accused me of trying to ruin her day. It made me feel guilty, but part of me thinks she deserves what's coming to her. She's always been spoiled and irresponsible with money. My parents are moving to a small cottage they inherited, and my sister wants to live in the guest house with her fiancé. They don't have jobs, yet they complain about paying rent and spend money on unnecessary things. My dad said they can't move in, but I worry my sister will get her way. I feel bad for her, but I also feel like this might be karma catching up with her. It's a mix of emotions, and I'm not sure if it's wrong to feel this way. But it seems like she might learn some important lessons through all of this. I decided I won't tell her the truth about her cheating fiancé. Maybe if she had grown up into a less nasty, entitled adult, then I would have chosen differently. Generally calm people, what made you lose your absolute crap that time? My son was maybe 8 months old and had recently diagnosed as profoundly deaf. Deaf kids will often inhale to make vibrations and noise that they can somewhat hear for stimulation. We were on pins and needles as I had just lost my job and our insurance, and the cochlear implant surgery was going to cost us $170,000. We'd have to sell the house and one of the cars. We needed a break and our in-laws took us to the food court at a local mall. Our boy started to inhale and gasp. He needs a beating. An obese 20-something said no so quietly to her friends at the table next to us. I rarely curse in public and am generally non-confrontational, but a stream of insulting profanity issued from my mouth for a good 10 minutes that would have put a sailor to shame. I found it couldn't stop and it got on the verge of Bukowski and poetry. I insulted her, her mother, her weight, and her pinched-faced friends. I launched into the smell of her twat, how obese she was, how she'd only be able to reproduce with a blind intoxicated moron with a death wish, as she was uglier than the devil's a-hole on fire with the crap of hell. And it only progressed from there. Female Lee Ermey's Marine drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket would have told me to tone it down a bit. I told her he was deaf and that we couldn't stop it, and this was a goddamn food court in a pissant southern town filled with pissant inbred motherfing hellspawn redneck ignorant mutant troglodytes that embarrass normal troglodytes. The food court was silent and all the eyes were upon us. And then it progressed from there. She got up and left crying. I can honestly say the whole rant was involuntary, like a puss-filled boil popping and draining in a torrent. I had never done anything like this before and have not done it since. I feel bad for her to this day. My entitled aunt showed up uninvited to my house and declared she is now living with me. The election had recently ended, and my aunt, being a huge Trumpy, was upset at the result. My aunt proceeded to flip out, breaking things, yelling, and even going as far as to set her daughter's "I voted" sticker on fire. Her husband called the cops. The cops declined to arrest her for anything, but suggested that she find a different place to stay for the night. Fast forward to 2 a.m. today. Here I am sleeping peacefully in my home over 500 miles from all that drama. My fence alarm goes off, waking me up. Thinking it may be a bear or a trespasser, I get my pants on and grab my firearm, just to be safe. I came out to find my aunt, who had just cut the lock off my front gate, because she couldn't get in. So, I safely stowed my weapon and began questioning her. She started crying, and screaming about how the devil took her family and they threw her out. She says that since she has nowhere else to go, I need to let her in. I told one of my guildies using the spare room so there's no space for her. I'm not gonna toss them out with 30 seconds of notice because my aunt showed up acting manic. My aunt decides to call the police and tell them that I'm keeping her from entering her home. We're out in the woods, so the cops don't get here quickly. 4:41 a.m., the cops show up. I see them talking to her in my driveway. She shows them the bolt cutters and the ruined lock. A few minutes later, the officer knocks on my door. I immediately cut him off to tell him that my aunt is crazy. I explain that she doesn't live here and never has lived here. That she lives in New Jersey. Then 10 minutes later, the cops come back to my door. 3 of them this time, not just the one from earlier. They tell me that my aunt drove from New Jersey, highly intoxicated, and that they are about to arrest her. I then hear her screaming in the background as she's being handcuffed, proclaiming that we are the problem with America. She ended up spending the night in the drunk tank with charges pending.
I stopped supporting my trans son. Now I feel terrible. I have decided to stop supporting my son, and I feel awful for it. Part of me wants to say this all started when he was little, but the main issues came about when he turned 18. I was far from a perfect mother. I got pregnant at 16 and had him at 17. I was lucky that I finished high school early. Shortly after I had my son, his father and I got married, then soon after my now ex-husband vanished, clearing out our bank accounts and making them negative. I spent the next 6 months sleeping in my car and getting back on my feet. I wasn't always as present as I wanted to be. I often needed him to be in daycare so I could work and get by, and he was always a handful. Every school year, it was the same thing. He was smart and a kind kid, but would always refuse to do the schoolwork. Every year 2 to 4 calls from the teachers wanting to figure out what was going on. As I started doing better financially, I would get him tutoring and therapy. We were constantly doing this dance of him doing better at school and emotionally, and then taking 5 steps back and throwing tantrums because he had accountability and keeping up with the grades he could obviously maintain. When he turned 18, we came up with an agreement. I would happily continue paying for his trans care. My son transitioned when he was 16, out of pocket. I'm self-employed. I pay for everything medical related out of pocket, depending on the copays that month, anywhere between $400 to over $1,000 per month, so long as he would keep going to therapy, go to therapy with me, and went to school at least part-time, 2 classes a semester at the junior college. He agreed it was reasonable, but almost in the same way he always had. He tried really hard to wiggle out of all the above. The situation devolved from me needing to ask him to move out, to him moving in with his boyfriend of 2 months, to then 6 months after that moving out of his boyfriend's parents' place to a friend's house. All the way we bickering about him going to school and therapy and me nagging him about when we will have sessions together. Fast forward and he blocked me on everything on social media, claiming I was controlling him and manipulative. One of his main points was a phone conversation we were having where I was mentioning that I was starting the process of moving out of the country and wanted to know if he wanted to come. And then followed it up with giving him options to look at other countries. I genuinely feel and believe that America is going to become increasingly unsafe for trans people, and I just wanted him to be safe and consider his options. After therapy and reflection, it almost feels like this was just him pushing more because he was asked to be responsible for himself and had to do the work and didn't want to. Fast forward even more and now he's in contact with his biological father, the man who abandoned us, and says they are his family now. I'm not even angry, I'm sad and broken.
I did not wash under my foreskin for the first 15 years. This happened around 6 years ago when I was in 9th grade. I grew up not knowing anything about my weenie or how to clean it. My parents never taught me anything about genitals. I apparently never asked, I only knew where the pee came out. So one day in 9th grade biology, our teacher covered the male reproductive system. She reached a point where she mentioned that for uncircumcised males, the foreskin is supposed to retract over the head of the rod. I was pretty shocked because that's certainly not how mine worked. By that time, I was a daily meat beater, and my foreskin could barely go back enough for me to see the entrance of the urethra. So armed with my new knowledge about how my weenie was supposed to work, I went home, and a few Google searches led me to discover that I had a severe phimosis. So being the pragmatic young buck I am, I also Google how to fix it. There were 2 options, either tell my parents and have them take me to a doctor for surgery or do stretching exercises. Not wanting to tell any of this to my parents or have someone come near my willy with a scalpel, I opted for the latter option. I got some baby oil, the only lube available at the time besides my mom's bottle of expensive extra virgin olive oil, and went to work. After about 4 hours of stretching, I finally started making some progress. I could see a slightly bigger area now, not just the opening of the urethra like before. Everything was going great except for one thing. From the underside of my foreskin came the most pungent, musty, cheesy disgusting smell I've ever had the displeasure of smelling, even to this day. It dawned on me that my willy had truly not been cleaned in my entire life up to that point. I kept stretching over the course of a few days, and I started to notice a thick, gooey greenish-brown sludge seeping from under the foreskin as I stretched. Some quick Googling taught me that this was smegma, also known as weenie cheese. I cleaned it off whenever it seeped out during my stretching exercises. As much as it disgusted me, everything was still going fine. That was about to change real effing fast. So this was about 10 days into my stretching, and I'd gotten my foreskin about to the halfway mark. I was getting very excited to finally have a normal full, functioning frick stick, so I got very impatient and decided I'd try to force it back. That day, I lubed and got to work. I pulled it back as far as it would go and pulled it some more. I pulled it till I couldn't bear the pain anymore. I did this repeatedly for around 3 hours until I somehow managed to pull it almost to where it was almost over the entirety of the head of my little guy. I got way too excited, and despite the pain, I gave it one big yank, and I felt the foreskin pop over the back of the glands. It hurt like hell, but I was so relieved that I didn't care. I opened my eyes, and my heart skipped several beats. The entire lower half of the head of my rod, down to the area behind it, was caked with thick brown/green smegma. That was now mixing with the blood that seemed out of where I tore the top part of my foreskin when I yanked it over the glands. I freaked and squeezed the area to stop the bleeding, which only worsened the pain. It eventually stopped, and I had to chip away at the smegma caked onto my willy. I eventually got it all off after half an hour of scrubbing. I was still hurting, but I was finally done. I got the foreskin all the way back over the head of my willy. I thought that was it. I tried rolling it back over the head, but it wouldn't budge, so I just left it. I completely ignored that forcing the foreskin back would constrict all the blood flow to the head of my pee-pee. You know how a balloon looks when you fill it with water and tie it? That's how my pee-pee looked. I went to bed, went to school the next day in severe pain, and acted like everything was fine. I was still in major pain when I got home, so I decided to check on it. I undressed in the shower and looked down at it. The first thing I saw was the blisters. 2 huge brown pus-filled blisters, one on the right side and the other on the underside of the glands. The next thing I noticed was that my weenie was now seemingly turning some shade of white. I'm a black guy. I realized that if I didn't find a way to get my foreskin back over my glands, it would probably shrivel up and fall off. I lubed up again and began forcing my foreskin back over the glands. This was made even more difficult because of the 2 big blisters in the way. I kept trying to force it back over, and I put too much pressure on one of the blisters, and it broke, causing pus to leak out all over my wiener and fingers. My stick was on fire at this point, and I was holding back tears, but I kept pushing until I felt it pop back over the glands. Judging from the liquid that seeped out afterward and the extra jolt of pain I felt, I guess the second blister popped too. Once again, I left it and effing went to bed. I checked 3 days later, and my meat returned to its original color. I rolled back the foreskin again and cleaned where the blisters were, and within 3 weeks, I was pretty much okay. My foreskin was still tight, and I think constricting my glands with the opening of my foreskin for a whole day probably made me lose a tiny bit of sensation down there. Still, hey, at least my weenie is clean. Also, please teach your kids about their bodies for the love of God. Even if they aren't as stupid as I was, don't take that risk. I slept with my daughter's ex-boyfriend, he got me pregnant and I had an abortion. They got back together and got married. This was back in, let me think, maybe 1997? I was 38 and my daughter was 18, and she was dating Harry, who was 24. I was an alcoholic and dabbled in other substances, mostly cocaine. I was not a good person, let alone mother. Not like I was abusive to my daughter or anything, but I was generally inattentive and cared more about my alcohol and substances than her, especially in her teen years. I am 14 years sober now. I disapproved of my daughter dating Harry, but I never told her why. He would flirt with me, constantly, and the age difference also creeped me out. Also, he was an alcoholic and substance user, just like me. She broke up with him over his alcoholism. Soon after she moved away, not too far but regardless she didn't live with me anymore. Harry kept calling me and asking if we wanted to get drinks. I turned him down, but then one day he said he had a bunch of coke and I couldn't resist. He came over, we did the coke, and we ended up having intimacy. He was a very good-looking guy. He looked a lot like that ridiculous 80s Justin Bieber picture that was on the front page today. That is actually what made me think about him. For the next few months, maybe like 3 to 4 months, he would sometimes come over and we would have intimacy and do substances and get intoxicated together. Any substance addict knows what that is like to have a substance addict buddy in that way. Then I got pregnant. I knew it was him. I had intimacy without a condom a few times stupidly. I never told him I was pregnant, and I went and got the abortion and kept it a secret. Anyways, I stopped seeing him after that. It was too weird. I also got sober, for like 4 months, before relapsing. Fast forward 2 years and my daughter contacts me and tells me that she got back with Harry, and that he is fully sober. I was mortified honestly. He was gonna tell her that we slept together, and she is going to hate me for life. They came over one day and said hi,
and when my daughter was gone, Harry told me that there is no reason to tell her about what happened. I agreed. It's been 16 years of marriage on their part. They have a kid together. Harry got cancer, then beat it. I got sober. That's basically it. I don't see them very often. They live in Texas and I live on the East Coast. But whenever I do, there is always that tension between me and Harry. It's literally the first thing that comes to either of our minds. I can just tell. Not like intimate tension, like why did we have to do that? What the heck is wrong with us? Kind of tension. I think about this often, especially when I see my grandson. I always think that could have been my son if things had gone differently, but wow, what a disaster that would have been if I decided to keep that child. My vegan daughter started throwing a temper tantrum because I cooked steak on my birthday, so I gave her a reality check. My 17-year-old daughter has recently turned vegan, and with it her attitude towards non-vegans has become appalling. We have tried adjusting and accommodating her, sometimes having vegan dinners with her, buying her vegan substitutes, and my wife even bought a vegan cookbook. Despite this, our daughter still sees us as animals killers, and constantly says this. A few weeks ago she gave out to me for using her plate to eat chicken and chips off. It's almost as if she has made being vegan her entire personality and refuses to see that just because I eat a steak, I am not Lucifer in disguise. She has changed her social media bios to proud vegan, is unable to have a conversation without mentioning animal cruelty, and without fail, every time she sees me eating meat, she will go on a huge spiel about the animal that I am eating, saying it had a life, it was born happy and just wanted to live a free life, but then it was encaged and killed. This type of guilt tripping happens each time she sees me or my wife eating meat. We have tried our best to put up with it, but I finally couldn't take any more of her moral superiority and almost cult-like views, and I blew up at her yesterday. So yesterday was my birthday. On my birthday, I usually have a tradition. I'm a man who loves steak, and so what I do is I go out and I buy an expensive steak from the butcher's, come home and grill it. I usually buy the largest steak possible and my wife and I have it. This year it was going to be different, of course. My daughter was not going to be having it. I warned her in the morning that I will be eating steak later and I don't want to hear comments about it. I heard her mutter animal k-yer underneath her breath, but I let it go. Well, later on in the day I was in the back garden grilling my steak with my wife beside me. Then my daughter came out. She saw the steak, and she started to cry. My wife noticed her crying before I did and went over to comfort her, but she pushed my wife to the ground. I heard something thud and I looked over to see my wife on the grass, and my daughter crying. I instantly went to ask what the hell had happened and help my wife up, but my daughter started screaming at me, saying that I was using my birthday as an excuse to KLL and consume an innocent cow, that I was a filthy k-yer and that I deserved to go to jail. She was screaming this and I'm surprised none of the neighbors came out. I went inside and grabbed my daughter's arm to drag her in. I'm not proud of it, but I was angry at that moment. I went off on her. She was still crying and tried yelling, but I yelled over her. I asked her how dare she shove her mother to the ground, how dare she parade around acting morally superior because she doesn't eat chicken, that what she is doing is really affecting myself and her mother and that we are sick of her abuse. I told her that the only reason we have put up with her nonsense for as long as we have is because we are her parents, that where she acts this way around anyone else it would not end well for her. I said more, but that was the gist of it. I ranted for maybe 5 minutes straight, and during my rant my daughter actually stopped crying. I think I was being so loud that it just made her stop the tears. My wife did not step in to stop me either. I ended my rant by saying I'm sorry but you have to stop. My daughter did not reply and went upstairs into her room. My wife told me it was a bit much and after calming down, I agreed. I went upstairs and asked my daughter if I could come into her room, and she said yes. There we talked again where I apologized for the things I said and if they came across in a very hurtful manner, but that the way she has been treating us has been building up for a long time. We hugged it out by the end, and my daughter told me she was sorry but she wants to remain vegan. I told her that was not a problem as long as she doesn't rub it in people's faces and make us feel terrible for eating meat. She agreed. Am I the a-hole for not helping my sisters after our father's death? I, 60s, have 2 sisters, 60s, and we were born from our father's first marriage. Unfortunately our mother passed away when we were young, so our father was left all alone to take care of us, and I admit it must have been difficult to do so. I mean, we were teenagers at that time. Our father was an immigrant from Italy and saw the horrors of war firsthand, but was always a good father and also a decent man. He married his second wife, the stepmother, and they stayed together until his death. Bear in mind the stepmother was the same age as us and so the relationship between was always strained. Stepmother got pregnant and at that time concerns were raised because of their advanced age. Unfortunately our father passed away 15 years ago, my sisters and I were in our 50s, half-sister was only 12. She's now 27. I should mention that half-sister was absolutely the apple of our father's eye. When he passed, I made it very clear that I didn't want anything to do with the stepmother and half-sister anymore, that all the ties were gone and so we were no contact for a couple years even though we lived in the same street. Stepmother took my half-sister out of school after his death, purposely ruining her daughter's life. I know that my half-sister did not have the normal experience of growing up, she also lost her friends, she missed out on the experiences, and I always knew it would come to this because stepmother is a terrible person. I recognize that I did have the privilege of keeping a normal life after a parent's death, and while it is a shame that half-sister hasn't had the same chance, I choose not to intervene. Fast forward a couple years, found out my half-sister got severe depression, hasn't finished her studies and is practically a doormat. Our father left each daughter a share in his estate, but half-sister was very irresponsible with hers. She tried to reach out to my sisters and I, saying her psychiatrist told her she needed a support group, and said she's alone and can't count on anyone else. She's going through a difficult time and wants to cut ties with her mother/our stepmother. She says she desperately needs someone. We tried to explain to her that a lot of time has passed, there's no bridge between us and our father's already dead. As in, there's no bond anymore. I got a call a couple days ago from the psychiatrist, apparently she gave my number to him in case of an emergency, who's very worried about her.
To put it bluntly, I told him to forget my number, to never contact me again, and made it clear that I don't want anything to do with the stepmother and half-sister. I also told him I will never forgive my half-sister for what she did to our father, destroying his legacy. Am I the a-hole? What bridge were you more than happy to burn? My abusive ex-girlfriend. It's been 6 years now and it's still hard thinking back to it. I was a big, muscular guy dating this petite cheerleader. If someone was told that there was an abusive relationship going on between us, never in 100 tries would someone guess she was the abusive one. For people who say ignorant comments like, just leave her, or things like that, clearly don't understand. Every day you're being told that nobody else would ever want you and you're lucky to have a girlfriend as great as she was. Your father should be ashamed of who his son is. I don't know why anybody would waste time on you, etc. You feel so dependent on that person because you feel like there's nobody else who would ever love you and you're going to be alone forever if you leave. It was mostly verbal/emotional abuse, but sometimes it did lead to physical abuse. On days I felt that I could walk away from her comments, she would come slap me, hit me, and she even hit me with a metal bat. This tears a person down so much you just can't do anything. The only way that I was able to leave her was that I completely accepted that if I left her I probably would never find anybody else to ever care about me at all and I would always be alone. I was okay with that rather than being with this girl any longer. It was the absolute hardest thing I ever had to do. More and more comments about how I'll never find anybody or ever be loved, how I should end myself if I do actually leave because it will only be worse living without her. I blocked her on every social media, her phone number, everything save an actual legal document making her stay away, and I just felt numb. She showed up to my house multiple times but I never went to the door to see her. It took 3 years before I let someone back into my life romantically. And it was a complete blessing compared to what I was in. I eventually broke things off with her, just because we never saw each other. But as of 4 months ago, I have been engaged to my girlfriend of 2.5 years and are getting married next June. She is the greatest thing that ever happened to me and the only person who I've ever been able to talk to about that relationship. I do not regret any part of what I did, and I truly hope that my old abusive ex sees what she has done and changes to a better person. She has 2 kids with different fathers now, and I certainly wish that she will never treat those children how she treated me and they can grow up and live great lives. Who she was as a person made understanding why her kids don't have fathers a million times easier.
My greedy mother-in-law wants to put $1 million life insurance policy on my husband and be the sole beneficiary. My husband called her out and she eventually admitted her horrible scheme. My husband and I have been married for a little less than a year. My husband's mother has always been off, so we have kept her at arm's length in our lives for that very reason. She is always trying to get money out of people, and playing the woe is my card to get sympathy. She is also extremely needy towards her son and demands that he stay with her 3 times a week. Well, this morning she called my husband and has been talking about opening up a life insurance policy on him for about $1 million. She wants to pay into this 100% and be the sole beneficiary of the policy. Now my husband is an extremely healthy man, and his mother is not. She is overweight, has diabetes, and does not take any medication for it or attempt to improve her lifestyle. My husband found the entire thing extremely amusing, but it made me extremely uneasy. She knows his social and information. I'm sure if she wanted to she could easily do this. But the thing that rubs me the wrong way is she keeps saying, I want to make sure I am financially set when you die, says nothing about the family he is creating or anything. She just wants to make sure she can take care of herself with all that money when he's dead. Like it is a for sure thing he is going to be dead rather soon so she can bank in on it. She also told him, make sure you don't tell your wife. You know how people get when they find out you have a hefty life insurance policy. You wouldn't want her to try and murder you. I really don't know what to do. I have tried explaining we need to go no contact with my husband, but he keeps saying I shouldn't worry because there isn't anything she can do and to just ignore it because she'll find another get-rich-quick scheme. Well, today while I was out with my husband running errands, his mother continued to call him and text him. One of her texts finally got him to call her, which was her telling him she had been in a car accident over the weekend. So he calls her and she tells him about how she supposedly fell asleep at the wheel of her car and hit a cement median, ruining the passenger door inside of the car, and she ends up trying to request that he puts her car on his insurance, then give her permission to drive it so that she does not have to pay the increased insurance prices that her insurance is charging her now. When he tells her he is not going to be doing that, they started to get into a heated argument and she brings up the life insurance policy again. In the midst of it, he called her out, saying, I bet you are just planning on taking out a loan on the health insurance so you can get rich quick. And she admitted to it. She told him that was her plan on all along. She was going to take out the life insurance policy, pay it for a few months until she could take out a large loan against it and then stop paying. My jaw just dropped when she proudly admitted to it. My husband told her off, and now we are going no contact. He is extremely angry and has basically said she has ruined any relationship they could have possibly had with one another.
People who encountered popular serial killers. Who was it? How are you alive? Everyone knows this person, but I guarantee you'll never guess who. It was 1977. I had taken time off work to have a baby and stay home with her, but I still needed an income. So my mother had hired my younger sister and me to do the dirty, back-breaking work in her shop while she took care of her first infant granddaughter. My sister and I were working at our mom's antique store one summer day. Mom had just gotten a truckload of European oak furniture that needed to be cleaned and polished, had the handles screwed on and so forth. A nice-looking young man came into the store and started talking to my sister, who was 17 at the time. He introduced himself as Ted Smith, and we laughed and said we must be related as Mom's maiden name was Smith also. He chatted both of us up, but focused on Sis for the most part. He purchased an armoire, but said he'd have to go get his truck, since at the moment he was driving his VW Bug, an old VW Bug. He then asked my sister and me if we wanted to go out to dinner that night with him. We were sweaty and dirty from work, I had a baby to care for, and Sis already had a boyfriend, so we said, thanks, but no thanks. He asked me to ride with him to get his truck so he could drop his Bug off at the auto shop for repairs, but by that point I had to get home to my infant, right away, because I was still nursing her and I thought my breasts were going to begin leaking at any minute. However, he wouldn't give up trying to get one or both of us away from the shop. He said he could come back about 10 o'clock that evening for his armoire and asked whether one or both of us would be there. We replied, no, we close the shop at 6, and we both have places to be tonight. He was persistent. How about tomorrow night? No, we close at 6 o'clock, except on Saturdays, when we close at 4 o'clock. He asked whether one of us could meet him early in the morning, like at 5:30 a.m., but neither of us wanted to. He was getting to be a bit creepy and Sis and I were eye-rolling at each other. Eventually, he said he was sorry but he couldn't buy the armoire if we couldn't be flexible. We hated to give up the sale, but after he had been there for 2 hours, we thought he was just looking and taking up our time. We still had a lot of work to do on the furniture that had just arrived in the shop. Finally, we just wanted to finish our work and go home. At 6 p.m. as we were leaving, his VW Bug was parked outside and he asked us whether we wanted to go for coffee. He especially wanted my sister to go. We said, thanks, Smith, but no thanks. Like we said earlier, we have plans, but he continued to be insistent. Finally I said, Sis, let's go. I'll take you home. Even though she had her car there, for some reason I didn't want to leave her to drive home alone with this guy around. So he drove off in his Bug and we really didn't think of it again. Until the next year, when his picture appeared in the paper. The man was Ted Bundy.
My boyfriend roped me because I laughed at a joke. I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend, Alex, for over a year. We've had our ups and downs, but I believe that we loved and cared for each other deeply. However, recent events have left me questioning everything. A few nights ago, Alex and I went out with friends to celebrate a friend's birthday. We had a few drinks, and I admit I was feeling a bit tipsy. I was talking to a guy friend of ours and I was laughing a lot when Alex came around, looking extremely irritated. Alex offered to drive me home, and I trusted him completely, so I accepted. I saw him dab up his friends and they yelled, "Have fun getting pounded tonight." I thought they were just being playful, but looking back on it, I don't know anymore. Once we got to my place, I realized I was too intoxicated to go inside safely. I asked Alex to help me inside, but instead of assisting me, he insisted on coming in with me. I thought he was just being considerate, so I agreed. He had this big grin on his face and I thought it was nothing. But once we were inside, things got messy. He helped me undress and get to bed, but when I was in bed, he started saying that I owed him something. Despite my attempts to communicate that I wasn't feeling well and needed rest, Alex started to initiate intimate contact. I repeatedly told him that I wasn't in the mood and that I wanted to sleep it off, but he continued anyway. He told me that I was a good-for-nothing SLT who deserved to be touched like this. That he bet I wanted that guy friend to be inside instead now. I felt trapped and powerless. I couldn't believe that the person I loved and trusted would disregard my feelings and desires in such a way. It wasn't consensual, and I felt violated and used. I don't know why he hates me so much. I've literally done nothing to him. The next morning, Alex acted as if nothing had happened and left without a word. I was left feeling confused, hurt, and violated. I know that. What took place wasn't right, and I'm struggling to come to terms with it. He's texted me several times today, telling me that he had an awesome time. I'm scared to text him back now. He's rich and powerful, and I love him. He did this because I was too friendly. How do I fix this?
What is the biggest plot twist of your life? I married my straight best friend, so I was part of this 3-man best friend group thing. We'll call these 2 best friends D and M, the kind of friendship where we can and do talk about anything without discomfort. We literally cannot be uncomfortable around each other anymore. One of our random guy talks goes in the direction of intimacy one day and I mention the idea that I'm probably bi. There's a point that's made relating back to the fact that we have this 3-way bromance going on where we joke about being lovers. And there was a tongue-in-cheek joke rumor that I was secretly dating D in high school, so it's funny that I'm not straight. One day I'm hanging out with D and just chatting. Topic of intimate stuff comes up. Asks about my bi-ness. Asks if I've ever thought about him or am in that way. Christ, man, I know you're just curious but come on. This isn't gonna end well. I go for honesty and openness and he responds in kind because we're the kind of guys that can speak honestly without awkwardness. No need to dress things up. So we talk frankly about the theoretical idea of the 2 of us as a romantic couple on the assumption that speaking about it seriously doesn't mean we are serious about it. We get stuck on this topic and somehow come to the conclusion that we wouldn't make a bad couple. Too bad he isn't into guys, right? Long story short, it ends up being a long night and the more he thinks about it, The more he doesn't see much of a problem with the idea. I knew we were tight, but this is something else. He is similarly surprised by how much the idea doesn't faze him, and within a couple hours our tone moves from neutral comment stemming from simple curiosity to a pretty serious discussion that sounds like he might try to take it somewhere. Don't know what happened, seriously, but suddenly it's like 1 in the morning and he straight up asks me out. Completely serious. Dudes, as far as I know, completely straight, and I've been best friends with him for half my life. And he's telling me he thinks he loves me, and it feels so natural to say that, and why didn't he see it sooner? Fast forward a few years and now we're engaged.
My neglectful father chose to be with my insecure sister's sleepover rather than my graduation ceremony, so I gave away their tickets and told them not to bother coming. I have my high school graduation ceremony this Wednesday. It was sent to my parents in an email that I will be giving a speech that day as my grades made me valedictorian of my school's class of 2024, and I was excited to do so. My school made us reserve and buy tickets to the ceremony weeks in advance, and I picked mine up on the 26th. The problem started at dinner when I told my family I picked up the tickets for my graduation day and would keep them with me until the day of just to make sure they don't get lost. My dad told me that he and my sister had plans for an hour before the ceremony, but that my mom would be there the whole time, and that they'd try to be there for the after party. The plans my dad and sister have is some sleepover with her and her friend group in the north, around a 2-hour drive from where we live. The parents didn't want to leave a bunch of under 16-year-old girls alone that far, so everyone's parents are also going for supervision. I was honestly shocked for a moment, before starting to laugh, assuming they weren't serious. When I realized they actually weren't joking, I'll admit I was a bit mad. This isn't the first time that my sister tried to spoil my event. She did this as well in my 18th birthday, where she had a panic attack and my dad was with her the whole time. He wasn't able to dance me that night. I'm usually a very shy and non-confrontational person, even around my family, but I started yelling at my dad and sister, asking if they were seriously ditching my graduation ceremony. I told them that the after party was useless to attend, and that all the pictures of the graduates with their families would be taken at least 2 hours before the ceremony. They said it's fine and we can take our own pictures the day after my graduation, but I got up and left dinner. Over the weekend, I saw a few people on my class group chat complain that they didn't get enough tickets, so I offered up the 2 tickets I had, and met up with a girl from my class to give them to her, and even though I told her not to, she actually paid me the original price for them. When the topic of graduation was brought up by my dad today during lunch, I told him that I gave the other 2 tickets away and only my mom will be attending, so they shouldn't bother with the after party. He got mad and asked why I would do that, to which I replied that I don't see the point in wasting money on tickets if they're not going to use them. My dad blew up on me, saying I'm acting like a spoiled brat, and it's not like I'll die if he and my sister are a bit late to my graduation. I spoke to a few people about it, my friends and my grandma. My friends said good riddance, and if they consider their plans more important, they can have fun. But my grandma said that while she understands my side, I shouldn't have given away the tickets just to spite my dad, because maybe he would have changed his mind and gone on time. So I'm looking for a non-biased opinion.
Mother-in-law abandons my child, shows up after 25 years and expects to be accepted as a grandmother. When my son was 3 days old, his mother decided she didn't want a child anymore, so I've raised him as a single father since then. She claims she's not ready to have a child and refused to even feed him or hold him. I wanted to give her some time. I thought that maybe it's just postpartum depression. I was ready to be there for her, but she was serious. She packed her stuff and left the hospital. Her last words were that she wants to see neither me or our son ever again, and she kept that promise. I got the feeling that mother-in-law had something to do with it, because during her pregnancy she was talking all the time about how young her daughter is and how inappropriate of a moment this is for her to have a child. I think mother-in-law somehow secretly persuaded her to take this step. So I was left alone with an infant in my hands. It definitely wasn't easy. I was just 21 years old, I had to leave college and work very hard to give my son everything he needed. Fortunately, I wasn't completely alone. There were people who helped me to get through the hardest period, people who babysat him while I was working, who gave me advice on how to take care of a baby, and I'll be forever thankful to them. When he grew up a little, it became easier. I could send him to a kindergarten and work without asking people to take care of him while I'm not there. During all this time I hope to hear from his mother. I hope that she'll eventually come around and realize you can't just leave your child like a worthless piece of trash. But, even though I had left her my contacts and she could call me or write me a letter whenever, she didn't. I never heard from her. She never once used her rights to visit him. When he was little, he often asked me why his mother left him, why she didn't want him. And I didn't know what to answer because I always tried not to speak badly of his mother in front of him. Now my son is 25 years old, he's a hardworking, educated young man, and I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud of myself that I was able to raise him to be a good person. We stopped talking about his mother a long time ago. It was his initiative. He was like, well, if she doesn't want to be with us, then it's her loss and there's nothing we can do about it. So recently mother-in-law appeared on our doorstep. Without a call, without any kind of notification, she was just there, and she had come to visit her grandson. I couldn't believe my ears, and at first, I almost didn't recognize her. And she was behaving as if she was a caring grandmother who had come to see her grandchild like she does all the time. Not like she was gone for 25 years. When my son saw her, he didn't recognize her either. I have shown him pictures of his mother and his grandmother just in case they show up one day, but I never really thought that they would. She ran up to him and hugged him just like a loving grandmother would, asking how he's doing and how big and beautiful he has become, and he pushed her away and looked kind of confused. I told him that it's his grandmother who randomly showed up to visit him, and he was like, oh, and walked away from her. Mother-in-law didn't take this reaction very well. She looked at me and was like, what have you taught him if he doesn't even say hello to his grandmother? He's looking at me as if I'm a stranger. Haven't you told him about his mother and me or shown him our pictures? Well, technically you are a stranger, mother-in-law. He had never seen you in person, so why are you so surprised? You show up out of thin air after 25 years when he's all grown up and expect him to treat you with love. Isn't it kind of delusional? My son said, Dad did show me your picture, but I needed no picture, I needed you to be there for me. He was quite hateful with her, throwing question after question at her, and mother-in-law's responses were so incredibly narrow-minded, it looked like she wasn't expecting him to ask any questions. He asked her where his mother was and mother-in-law was like, oh, she's doing very well, she's living together with a great man and she has 2 nice kids. She has gotten over that misunderstanding about your birth. She was acting as if her daughter was the victim here. As if we were the ones who left her. He asked her why did his mother abandon him. Mother-in-law said, well, she was such a young girl, it would be crazy for her to have a child at that age. She had her whole life ahead of her and a baby would only be an obstacle. You must understand it, she didn't want to lose her freedom. Honestly, her daughter was older than me when our son was born, she was 24. I don't think it's too early to have a child, it's not like she was 14 or something. Actually, age has nothing to do with it. I could have given up my son too, I was very young as well. But I didn't because I loved him and I wanted to be his father. At this point I wanted to show mother-in-law the door, obviously, she wasn't welcome in our house, but my son stopped me, he had one more question. He asked why mother-in-law didn't want to be his grandmother. His mother left him, fine, but why did mother-in-law leave him too? Mother-in-law said, well, I had no time to take care of you. I was a young woman too, I had my life too. And grandkids are only obligated to take care of grandparents when they're old and that's why I'm here. Then my son told her to leave and never come back, he said he doesn't want to see her ever again and he won't help her with anything. And as she was leaving, she attacked me like that's what I thought, a man alone cannot raise a proper human being. Such a rude and impolite boy, he would have turned out better in an orphanage than with you. So according to mother-in-law, the conclusion is, don't have children while you're young, or if you do, feel free to leave them and then come back a few decades later and they'll love you even though they have never received any kind of care from you. But seriously, what the hell was she expecting?
Bridezilla ruins her own wedding by cheating with her fiancé's uncle, and then she demands that her bridal party pays for her cancelled wedding. So, my friend Dana, 29 female, was supposed to be getting married this past Sunday, January 14th. The wedding got cancelled and things had gotten very crazy. Dana was getting married to Josh, 32 male. She's still in college with me and asked a few friends from college, myself included, to be her bridal party. Now, from the start, this wedding has been a disaster. I'm going to just point out a few of the crazy stuff we dealt with. 1. She refused to invite my best friend, who she's supposedly good friends with, because she thinks we're lesbian lovers. We're not. 2. She had us go to the dress fitting and then demanded each of us pay $2,000 each for our dresses. Apparently she had a specific style she wanted. I can afford it, but I won't buy a $2,000 dress for one event. Some of the girls in the bridal party don't have that flexibility with money. 3. Apparently Josh couldn't invite any single females that were not blood relatives of him. So if he had any female friends, they were axed. 4. One of the girls in the bridal party doesn't drink because of her religion. Dana accused her of being pregnant in front of her parents and almost got her kicked out of her house. She was not pregnant and she dropped from the bridal party. She was a class act, though, and never bad-talked Dana. Just said she couldn't make it. We found out about it pretty much on the day of the wedding. 5. She tried to make us cancel our holidays with our families to instead go with her to a destination bachelorette party. I work full-time even during holidays, so I told her that was not happening. More of the bridesmaids said similar things and she dropped it. That's just 5 things of countless drama this wedding was having before the day. Now the meat of the story comes on the wedding day. The day started horrible. Dana was having a meltdown because apparently the flower girl had to cancel because she has chickenpox. She was threatening to sue the mother unless she brought this sick 3-year-old to the wedding. Josh apparently was able to calm her down from this starter outburst, and we began preparations. The whole day she had constant outbursts. She made people cry. Like, wedding staff and bridesmaids. The maid of honor deserves a medal for the amount of diplomacy and bull-crap control she had to do. I for the most part took the easy route and decided to work outside the bridal suit, like checking flowers, making sure food was okay. Basically any excuse not to be around the bride. Eventually I had my makeup and hair done, then the bride asked for a little bit of time alone to decompress from the stress. We didn't even fight it, you could not see a group of women run faster away. The wedding was starting in 30 minutes, so we figure she would be fine alone for that little. I spent those 30 minutes just sitting in the chapel with my phone. It had to be about 5 minutes before the start of the wedding when the maid of honor came over to tell me the wedding was cancelled. I asked her what happened. Maid of honor said, Dana was having a quickie with Josh's uncle in the room. Josh caught them. I just stared at the maid of honor with my mouth pretty much about to reach the floor. She told me to run and that she was trying to get as many people out before things exploded. So I quickly got my purse, gathered the 2 bridesmaids that were carpooling with me, and we left like the devil was after us. I checked with the other bridesmaid and all had escaped. That night I called the maid of honor to check what happened and the tea was bad. Apparently and rightfully, Josh called off the wedding, called her a few names, told off his uncle, and has since left with his mates to I hope have the biggest single man party ever. I feel so bad for him. He's an absolute gem of a man. He apparently also told Dana and her parents that she will be paying the cancellation fees. According to the maid of honor, Dana's father told her in front of everyone that she was paying it on her own for being a I thought that was the end of it. I made the choice to separate myself from this mess. Until I got a call from Dana, not even an hour ago, demanding $5,000 to help pay her cancellation fees. According to Dana, it was our duty as the bridal party to pay her cancellation fees. I obviously told her no and that she might as well lose my number. I am never speaking to this woman again. This has been pretty much the reaction of all bridesmaids and the maid of honor. By the way, maid of honor? Josh's older sister. Update 6 days later. Hey guys. I know a lot of people want to know what happened. After talking to Josh yesterday, he asked me to only say that he's okay, figuring things out and moving on. We're going to stay friends with him and his sister. Dana was told that no one in the group wants to interact with her, and since then it's been mostly radio silence. I can't share more about Josh's future plans, as he asked me not to. He did have a good laugh at some of the comments I show him and appreciates the support. The one detail I did get corrected on for those curious was about his uncle. He's the younger brother of Josh's mother and he's 55 years old. I thought he was married into the family, but I got that detail wrong. I also found out the most disgusting detail is the uncle knew Dana since she was a teenager. Dana and Josh are high school sweethearts. So, yeah, I kinda feel gross knowing that. Other than that, I got a major haul of cake. So at least I got something good out of this mess. New update 2.5 months later, so I finally got permission from Josh to update on the situation today. I'm going to start by saying he's doing much better. He's moved out to a new place away from Dana and has some of his mates as roommates. He also cut contact with his uncle, as did most of his family. He's put a pause on dating for some time considering Dana was his first and only girlfriend for years. So he needs time to heal. Dana has now become persona non grata with my friends. She even tried to move in with one of them, without telling her, by appearing at 10 p.m. at night and saying, "You can't send me away this late at night." It didn't work. I don't know where she's living, but I can say for sure she's absolutely without any doubt very much screwed. She has 4 lawsuits. One from Josh for obvious reasons, one from his sister for the dresses she bought, one from the bridesmaid she accused of being pregnant, and one from Josh's uncle since apparently Dana used his credit card. She apparently moved with him after the failed wedding. So yeah, she threw away her life and she's very much without support. I saw Dana's parents some days ago and they haven't had any contact with her since the wedding. They are actually moving with their other daughter, 22, to another state. As for Josh's sister, we've been hanging out for a while. She's actually become super tight with my friends and I. We're even planning a trip sometime next year with her and her 7 years old to Disney. And yes, we've all agreed to divide the babysitting. We offered, she didn't press us to do so. My pick-me best friend blasted me for putting abuse victims in danger. I had to go to the ER earlier today due to some chronic pain I've been experiencing for months. I don't like hospitals as I've had incredibly bad experiences with doctors and nurses being straight up disrespectful toward me. As a result, my boyfriend stayed by my side and advocated for me when doctors tried to downplay my pain. As we were getting ready to leave, some nurses did the old trick of asking me to go over some old paperwork regarding some allergy thing so they could get me alone. They asked if I was in any trouble because my boyfriend showed signs of aggression, him not taking the doctor's bull and standing up for me. I thanked them but assured them I was fine. I was ready to leave 10 minutes later. I met up with my boyfriend and on the way home he asked me what the paperwork was about and I responded, "Oh, they were just making sure I was okay. They thought you were aggressive when you were defending me and wanted to make sure I was safe." My boyfriend responded, "Well, that's good. I'm glad they have protocols in place." A few days later, I met up with my best friend and told her everything. I ended up mentioning this to her and she got really upset at me for spilling what those private meetings are for. I told her I didn't think it was a big deal in any way. Any man who watches a medical TV show, particularly dramas, will know what these private meetings are. I said abusers know medical professionals are trained to look for signs, which is why they don't like taking their injured partners to hospitals. Abusers know this and I didn't hurt anyone by being honest with my boyfriend. She got even more upset and said I really damaged the system but I have no idea what this supposed system is. Now she's going around telling everyone that I'm anti-feminist and a pick-me. I'm so confused.
My awful niece smashed my daughter's face into her cake on her birthday. My daughter's 5th birthday was 2 days ago and it was the most hectic birthday party ever. My daughter basically planned the entire birthday since she invited her friends and picked out all the decorations. The party was just going to be family and friends in the backyard of our house. Everyone arrived relatively on time, except for my sister. She came hours late with her children. I don't want to sound like a mean aunt, but her children are bad, disrespectful, selfish, and lack any manners. My sister essentially messed around and found out. There was a period of time where she went broke. My parents refused to help her because she had lied to them about going to college when she actually dropped out and used the money they would send her to buy substances. She never bothered to contact me for help because we were never on the best of terms since she always argued with me whenever she saw me, so she didn't have my number back then. In order to get back on her feet, she hooked up with guys for money. Things went wrong and she got pregnant 2 separate times by 2 guys who didn't want anything to do with her. Because her whole hookup thing was very anonymous, she had no way to find them so she couldn't even get child support from these guys. She was left alone to raise these kids, but she resents them and it shows, which is why she doesn't care about how they act. She couldn't care less about them being rude to people or not having any proper manners. If anything, they remind her of a period in time where she was at her lowest. She's also grown to hate me even more than she already did because I went to college, have a good job that pays well, and have a happy family. Ever since my daughter was born, my sister would have to hear about her from other family members or see her at family events. I can tell she doesn't like my daughter and I didn't want to invite her to the party because of it, but my daughter is too young to understand that her aunt doesn't like her and sees the world through rose-tinted glasses where the word hate doesn't even exist. The party was going well and my daughter was having a lot of fun. She especially loved the red carpet surprise we did when she entered the backyard in her dress and heels. I heard my niece ask her mom why she never had that for her birthday and it actually made me sad. I don't think it's fair how my sister treats her kids, but if I ever tried to lecture her about her kids, she would throw a huge tantrum and call me names. But now that I think about it, I don't think my nieces ever had birthday parties. Which would explain why she did what she did. When it was time to cut the cake, my daughter sat in her high princess chair with both of my nieces sitting on chairs on her left and right side. We turned the lights off, lit the candles, and we all started to record as we sang happy birthday. I knew this was a party my daughter would never forget, but not for the right reasons. Just as my daughter was about to blow out her candles, one of my nieces blew it out and the other one smashed my daughter's face into the cake. Not only was that incredibly dangerous, but so humiliating and it ruined my daughter's birthday. My husband and I rushed to my daughter and I unintentionally pushed the one that smashed her face into the cake onto the floor. She started crying, but I didn't care. The worst part is that some family members were still recording. I yelled at them to stop, but my sister started yelling at me for being immature, pushing her daughter, and said that my daughter was being dramatic. She said her daughters were just joking around so my daughter was just crying for attention. I told her that her daughters were out of control and they had no right to do this because it was my daughter's birthday, not theirs. Any pity I had for my nieces quickly left my body as I wiped the cake off of my daughter's face. My husband did damage control by getting people to stop recording and trying to kick my sister and her daughters out without causing a bigger scene. But that didn't work since my sister went as far as calling my daughter the N-word because she's half black from her dad's side. Her daughters started joining her in calling her that and that's when my husband had enough. He threatened to call the cops if they didn't leave, but I never expected what happened next. I'm uncomfortable with my trans sister wearing a dress to my wedding. I am getting married next month. I have one sister who is trans MTF who came out to me 5 years ago, and came out to our family recently. I love her very much, we're very close. The issue here is this is her first time presenting as a woman in public, and I feel like that is taking the attention away from myself and my fiancé. She sent me a message the other day asking if her outfit was okay for my wedding. It was a very tight, very low cut and revealing sexy cocktail dress. I told her I was uncomfortable with my wedding being the first place she publicly presented as a woman, as the attention would be on her and not me, and that's the one day it should be on me. After I said that, she called me and started yelling at me, calling me transphobic and an attention whore. Her girlfriend told me I made her incredibly upset and need to apologize and tell her she can wear it. Am I in the wrong? Do I need to apologize? Edit, I should not have posted her physical description. It is irrelevant. I am not uncomfortable with her presenting femininely at my wedding, nor am I uncomfortable with her wearing a dress. I am uncomfortable with that dress, but I fear I may have fumbled the ball. My sister and I have been texting, and have had a good chat. I apologized if I made it seem like she had to hide who she was. I told her I had no issues with her wearing what she felt comfortable with, but felt that dress was inappropriate for a wedding guest, and that I felt her using my wedding as the first time she wore a dress was taking attention away from me and my fiancé. She was receptive to this, but said she felt forced to come out and that wasn't a good feeling. I told her I understand and that I loved her and would support her every step of the way. My fiancé and I have decided to say F it, it's our wedding. If others want to give her attention, then so be it, we know we weren't important to them. Some people have made a point that she wants to feel like herself in our photos, so she can look back on her baby sister's wedding with all love and no discomfort. She has sent me a few other options for herself, some also pretty questionable, and some I quite like. No dramatic showdown, just two sisters who miscommunicated and fought, like sisters do.
My horrible husband made me pay his spousal support for his spoiled ex-wife. Now, he is forcing me to sign a prenup after 10 years of marriage. My husband 40 and I 32 have been married for 10 years. We are both in the military and he is eligible for retirement. Today he brought up me signing a prenup so in case we divorce I will have no right to 50% of his military retirement. I feel like I've been gutted on the inside and here is why. Background: when I married my husband he just got over a divorce and the ex took everything of value, new car, appliances, best furniture, etc. He was deep in credit card debt and in order to protect his future retirement he was paying her over $100K in spousal support over the next few years. I didn't care and was working hard with him to get us out of debt and to pay off what he owed to his ex. I had no debt of my own. We lived very frugally for years while his spoiled ex was sporting a luxury car and lifestyle paid in part by our earnings. Out of 10 years we've been married, my husband was cheating on me for about 8. It started with webcam models online and then he ended up cheating in real on his work trips with some of those models he found online. Around 10 women in real life and dozens online affairs. He ended up spending thousands of dollars on this hobby of his. I found out one day 7 years ago by checking the time on his phone because it was the closest one. Then the WhatsApp notification popped up and I was introduced to one of the dozens of chats with so-called models on his phone. My world fell apart. The excuse was that he needed more and he was addicted to sexting. When I asked for him to stop he threatened divorce. I was raised in a very traditional household and I couldn't bear the shame that will come from my family if I divorce, so I backed down. I was trying to make peace with it, but I felt inadequate and a failure as a woman. Over the years he didn't stop, but the years of me crying over every affair made him slow down a lot in his endeavors. Over the years my career went uphill and I'm finally feeling more confident and less scared of his divorce threats. Thanks to years of therapy and some medication I feel better and don't have intrusive self-deprecating thoughts anymore. Fast forward to today when my husband dropped the bombshell. We started talking about a mutual friend that has been living with her boyfriend for 10 years. Another mutual friend suggested that she should marry her so to protect her future and the sacrifices she made in order to ensure his very successful career. I also said that I support that idea 100% as my friend is dear to me and I'm afraid to see her left with nothing if he decides to leave. After my friends had left, my husband, who heard the conversation, said that he has been worried for years about losing 50% of his pension in case we decide to divorce. I had no intentions of divorcing my husband, but I was hurt by the comment, so I fired back that this is my insurance in case he decides to bring an 18-year-old webcam model into the house since he got bored of me of whatever, and trust me, I'm 30, but all of his APs are barely legal in their pictures with their real age being no more than 22. He got upset with me and went on the tangent on how women have these crazy laws protecting them and how poor men are being ripped off in their marriages. He also brought up his ex who took a lot from him while he got nothing out of the 7-year relationship and now she married again with a successful guy. On and on. I felt gutted on the inside. I was not crying anymore. I think I cried all of my tears out over the years. I just left for a few hours to give myself some space to think. I told my boyfriend he's a lazy idiot and I won't submit to him. This has led to a lot of discord amongst both of our families and them telling me to suck it up and be the woman he needs me to be. Right now, I'm staying with my sister while we figure things out. This all began the other day when my boyfriend and I got into an argument over split chores in the house. I had gotten home from work and came back to a dirty home. There were water bottles and trash on the floor, along with milk still being out for however long, and dirty dishes in the sink. To say the house was a mess would be an understatement. It was my boyfriend's day off today, but I had to work so he was home alone. I work in the ER and often have to do 12 to 16-hour shifts. He works in a warehouse and has a 40-hour work week, which I understand can be some back-breaking work, which is why I do what I do for him in the first place. Still, I manage to cook, clean, and pack food for both him and I, all while he does the bare minimum like taking out the trash or making sure he doesn't leave toothpaste on the bathroom sink. On this particular day, I had a rough day at work and was hoping to come home to a clean house, shower, and get some rest. It was my Friday, and I was finally getting paid. I just wanted to relax. But unfortunately, when I came back home, the house was a mess and he had guests a few hours prior, without my knowledge. I found him in the room bundled up like a sleeping peaceful baby. I was furious. I didn't even say anything to him. I simply showered and slept in our guest bedroom. I was awoken a few hours later by him yelling at me saying how lazy I was for just coming home and going to sleep. I yelled at him back saying if you wanted the house to be clean, you should have gotten your lazy butt up and cleaned up your own mess, yourself. I am not your maid, nor am I your mother. He yelled at me back saying that it was my duty as the woman of the house to keep it clean and that he wished I was like his mom because she did her job. When he said that, a flip in my head just switched. I argued back saying that if he wanted me to be like his mom, that he should be like his dad and be a better provider, and I quit my job. He said that he was the man of the house and whatever he says, goes. I don't remember entirely what I told him, but said something along the lines of, no, you aren't the man of the house. I am. I go to work, pay most of the bills, clean the house, cook almost every meal you eat, all while being pregnant. You can't even comprehend how exhausted I am. I am tired of your lazy butt doing nothing but come home from work, eat, and sleep. You don't help me with crap. A man is supposed to lead, but I always have to take initiative in this relationship and I'm tired of it. We're not even married and you're expecting me to step into the wifely role while you act like a kid, he said. See, this is why I haven't asked you to marry me. My heart dropped into my stomach. I told him that if he was never planning to marry me anyways, that we should go our separate ways and for him to stop wasting my time. I packed up and left, deactivated the tracking system I have in my car and phone, and has since blocked him. I am so hurt. I have invested so much of my time, money, and life into this man, and I receive nothing in return. As much as I want a baby, I don't want one that bad. I was set on leaving him until his mom called me last night and said I was stepping out of line as his woman and that I should have just cleaned up and that it wasn't that hard for me to do. This all could have been avoided if I decided to be the bigger person and clean up after him. That it is God's word that I, as a woman, should submit to her man. I am now second-guessing my decision in terminating my pregnancy and ending my relationship over something so small like cleaning. But I know that no matter what, it won't be enough for him and that I most likely will not get the ring I deserve. I know that there is someone out there who wants to give me the world, not this little ghetto corner of California that he has to offer me, but I do love him. Growing up without either parent in my life, if I decided to keep my baby, I want my child to have both parents in their life.
It's a piece of information you learned that now feels almost illegal to know. Read a personal finance book that recommended calling your providers once a year, credit card companies, TV/internet providers, cell phone company, etc.,
and demand a lower rate or price. I've been following that advice for 2 years and have not been denied once. Last week I saw a commercial for my internet provider offering a super low introductory rate, so I called to demand that I get that rate. They said no problem, and now I save an extra $700 a year because of a 5-minute call. I am a very passive introvert, so it's not the most easy or comfortable thing, but the money I save is worth it. They may say no initially, but if you ask a few times or ask to speak to their supervisor, they very usually.
My boyfriend is cheating on me, but doesn't see it because he loves the attention. My boyfriend and I have been together almost 5 years, and in that time, he's been nothing but loyal, sweet, and kind to me. I always thought he wasn't capable of cheating because of how much he told me he loved me and talked about wanting to marry me. Well, that changed when Rachel came into the picture. She is the stereotypical girl that the guy tells you not to worry about. My boyfriend John and her have been friends since the beginning of our relationship. So, this has been a pressing issue for 5 years and he hasn't done anything to fix it. The first time we had an issue was a few months into our relationship, when she told him she loved him. He turned her down, but they continued their friendship, which I told him made me really uncomfortable because he could be giving her the wrong idea. He quite literally told me I shouldn't worry about that because she respected our relationship. Considering she confessed when we were dating, she clearly did not. A few months after that, I went on a road trip with my mom, and he decided to take one with his best friend. Turns out Rachel had moved out of state and the two stopped near where she was now living. They went hiking for the day and she asked if she could share their hotel room for the night so she didn't have to drive back tired. Mind you, the hotel room had 2 queen beds. John's friend didn't want to share the bed, so he and Rachel convinced John that I wouldn't mind if they slept in the same bed. Had they asked me, I would have said no, but my boyfriend did it anyway. This gave her the wrong idea and she moved back to the state for the summer after that. They started hanging out constantly. She even told him that she's thinking of moving back, so they need to spend as much time as possible before that happens. This caused John to cancel plans with me to go be with her because his time with her was limited. Well, months later, Rachel does decide to move and she decides to ask Joe for help in transporting her stuff. This road trip would have entailed a 2-week car drive and staying at her place to help her move in. John asked me if I would mind if he went. I said I would. I didn't want him to go, and would consider that inappropriate. He got mad, but respected my wish. Things were good and quiet for a while, until she moved back a few months ago. At this point, she was only moving here to spend time with John and then moving out when she realized we were still dating. This time, it started at the gym. She joined the one we go to and always tags along when we both decide to go. John and I work out on different splits, but at the same time in the mornings. She started following his workout split, and joining in when they were close. Then she started flirting and touching him. I had a conversation with him about how uncomfortable that made me, and how I would like him to set boundaries with her. I didn't want to tell him to cut her off completely, mostly because he thought ultimatums like that were toxic girl behavior, but I seriously did not like him spending so much time with Rachel. Stupidly, I let them continue because I thought he would have a conversation about boundaries. However, the touching and flirting continued and worsened. I learned later that he had never talked to her about those boundaries. In fact, it went from being in the gym together to hanging out at her house. My family isn't in the picture, and I know he craves the attention and love that comes with a family like hers. That's why he started going more often, stopped asking me if he could go, stopped even telling me he was going and started lying about it, telling me he was with friends, or picking up food. I can see his location, so I know when he's over there. I started getting paranoid, and started checking his location every time he didn't respond to a text, or Snapchat. I was right to be paranoid. Because he was there with her every time. Today, I went to work and let him know I would be off early. He said he would be waiting for me when I got home so that we could watch TV and hang out. I messaged him 2 hours ago that I was heading back. He didn't open the message for an hour, so I checked his location. To no one's surprise, he's with her. They went out together and he put her over plans with me. I fully believe that they have kissed at least once and have probably done more, but I have no proof of this. Either way, he's still distant and I'm still depressed. He pretended to care and pretended to want to fix things. I can't tell if he's genuine, or he's just staying with me through obligation. Is this cheating?
Update: I hate working with my intellectually disabled coworker. A little while back I made a post about how I hated working with my intellectually disabled coworker. The gist of it is that whenever she worked with me I would end up doing a lot more work than normal just to keep the bakery going, and I would end up frustrated and annoyed. What I left out was the fact that this coworker is incredibly kind and good-natured, and while she doesn't do her job well, she is a great person that myself and my other coworkers like having around. We have grown incredibly fond of her, so I do not want to have her fired, as frustrating as she is. At the time of making the original post, I had very little knowledge about disability services and what that entails. A plethora of individuals with disability knowledge came out of the woodwork and informed me of a few things. 1. My boss is likely getting a tax break for having her work here and is getting a portion of her income federally subsidized. 2. She should have access to vocational programs to help her develop job skills. 3. Based on my description of her working, my boss has totally mismanaged her. I was under the impression that if I spoke up about how poorly she was doing at work, this sweet disabled girl would lose her source of income and end up homeless, hence why I've been spending the last 5 months or so burning myself out and getting frustrated to pick up her slack instead of telling my boss about her performance. For some reason, a lot of people couldn't seem to grasp this, and were incredibly condescending and unhelpful by saying things like just let her fail or communicate like an adult. Aside from those comments, there were a lot of helpful ones that assured me that I will be able to talk to my boss about this and probably get her into a better position in the bakery. So I did. Today was her first shift back since I talked to my boss about the matter. She came in later than usual, did the dishes, swept and mopped the floors, chatted with us a bit until the afternoon rush happened, grabbed a donut, and left. That was it. No food had to get thrown out, there was nothing put out late, everything went smoothly, and she is still making money and socializing with us. Thank you all for your support and info. Today I effed up by thinking I had dyslexia or something for 6 years. I am a 20-year-old male who has a family full of poor eyesight. By 7 I seem to have been really lucky because my eyesight seemed to be really good, or at least not blurry, so I decided to not get my eyes tested. However, by the time I was in high school I noticed I had a hard time reading. The letters were not blurry, it just hurt to read them, and sometimes I just couldn't make out what letter it was. Which may have started earlier, but high school is when I actually started to care about learning. Since I had it wouldn't be a huge leap for me to have another learning disability that made it hard to read or something. My parents talked to our guidance counselor and some teachers who worked on special ed kids. They thought I might have dyslexia. People with dyslexia have problems reading and understanding speech, which kind of sounds like me because I am a very visual learning but I can't read anything. High school was hard as heck and the assistance the school provided didn't really help. So I got really bad grades in high school mainly because I didn't take notes, because if I was not in the front of the classroom I could barely read the board. Fast forward to second year in college, I realized that I probably did not have dyslexia because when I have a book in front of me I can read it very well. I still had no idea why I could not read things far away, but that year it got bad enough that I couldn't even read the board when I sat in the first row. I finally decided to go to the eye doctor because maybe I'm nearsighted or something, even though it's not blurry. Isn't bad vision supposed to be blurry? Do the eye tests get scans taken and the doctor comes back looking kind of confused. Doctor, so, good news, it was easy to find lenses to fix your sight in the right eye. Turns out your right eye has astigmatism. It is oval shaped and therefore the light rays can't focus quite right in the back of your eye, making vision at long distances really blurry. Me, but my vision is not really blurry, doctor. That's the other thing. Your brain is an amazing thing, it can correct things that it thinks are wrong. Your left eye is shaped more normally and can see more clear longer. Your right eye sees 20/70. Technically you shouldn't have driven here because people with 20/70 vision are supposed to wear glasses while driving, but you did drive here because your left eye is basically 20/20 and your brain uses that to clear up your vision. However, in our tests you could not even read the biggest line of letters in the chart 100%. I don't know how to tell you this, but your left eye is amblyopic. It's a lazy eye, it just doesn't work with your other eye or your brain. That is why you also failed the depth perception test. Usually we have this talk when you're very young because that is when it becomes noticeable. I have never had this conversation with a 20-year-old. He'll get right to it. There is no cure, you will never be able to read out of that eye, and you will always have subpar depth perception. Do you understand me? Kinda, doctor. Don't worry, it's not the end of the world. Just like how your brain uses that eye now to clear your vision. When you get glasses it will start to use the other eye to read. It will take a few weeks to just keep wearing your glasses. So yeah, glossing over a ton of stuff, I got my glasses and for the first time in over 6 years I can read at a distance and it does not hurt to read anymore. Thanks kid me for not wanting to go to the eye doctor and instead making me do horrible at school and suffer with poor vision for my whole teenage life. Women caught creep trying to take pictures of her daughter. An older Hispanic man got caught taking upskirt photos of a 13-year-old girl. By the girl's mom. Who lost her effing mind at him. The woman's hand got cut in self-defense during armed knife robbery in the parking lot. Woman's kid, toddler/young child, pulled down his pants in front of customer service and poop on the floor. She pretended nothing happened. I completed her transaction. They left. I had literally zero idea what was happening until after the fact. Man poop all the F over himself. I mean like, himself and a good portion of the men's restroom. Another customer came out and told me that there was a crying old man sitting in his own feces in the bathroom. That customer said he would be right back, bought a bunch of wet wipes and took them into the bathroom. I was discussing the situation with my manager when the man came up and said the old man is cleaning himself off in the bathroom and the customer said he lived about 2 minutes away. He then went to get a change of clothes for the old man while my manager called the police. We were worried he could have Alzheimer's or dementia and wanted to know he got home safely. The customer came back and helped the elderly man into a change of clothes, and last I saw my manager and the customer and the old man went to the front of the store. Manager said he went with the police and that the police had apparently inquired if we would like to press charges for vandalism, which my manager said no. Said manager proceeded to go into the bathroom himself to hose everything down. Each restroom had a large metal box on the wall that contained a hose for sanitation. For these exact kind of moments I assume that manager was the best manager I ever had. Good guy and a great leader. I have a few more stories about him. And that grocery store. They knew I was innocent, but they still sent me to jail for 10 months. Just after I turned 19, I was arrested and charged for an armed robbery I was completely innocent of. It destroyed me. Of the 10 months in jail, I spent 6 in solitary confinement on self-end watch. This is how it happened.
I spent my birthday at a resort hotel with my girlfriend at the time. That night at around 3 a.m. the front desk was robbed by two people, one with a firearm and one with a knife. We were questioned when we left the hotel at 11 a.m., since we roughly, and I mean roughly, matched the height and weight description of the masked robbers. Later that day, it was discovered that my girlfriend had used a bad credit card to pay for the room, unbeknownst to me, and we were both publicly arrested on a sidewalk and taken to the state police barracks in handcuffs, without a word on what we were being charged with. We were taken to separate rooms and questioned for hours on end about the robbery, the same questions over and over again. She ended up going to jail for the credit card and I was released but told to return the next day for further questioning. I did, and was taken to a back room, sat in a corner and had two detectives relentlessly question me, picking apart everything I was saying looking for any circumstantial evidence that could connect me to the crime. They were suggesting to me that my girlfriend had robbed the place and I was going down with her if I didn't give them information. Being 19, I had no idea what to do and believed what they were telling me. I did not question the falsified information they presented to me and I was brought several times to the brink of giving a confession after being threatened with 10 years upstate if I didn't cooperate. 10 days later, 2 officers showed up at my door and arrested me for armed robbery. My girlfriend was coerced into giving a confession implicating me as an accomplice. I was placed immediately into solitary on a 24-hour self-end watch, and anxiously waited for a public defender. A week later she showed up and I told her I was totally innocent. She rolled her eyes and said, "Are you kidding me?" I burst into tears, my last hope of release being dashed, and she realized I was telling the truth. She said there's no defense against my girlfriend's confession, and I sank into such a deep depression coupled with shock that I had a psychotic break a few months into my stay. 90 days in solitary at 19 with no hope of proving your innocence will do that. The district attorney made periodic visits to me, offering 2 to 5 year deals for a confession and 10 years if I fought the charges, but I told him I would not admit to something I didn't do. Fast forward to 6 months after my arrest, all spent in solitary. I was woken and driven hurriedly early one morning to the state police barracks, where the DA met with me in a back room and said, "We have determined through further investigation that you were not at the scene of the crime." I was bursting with anger inside and said, "So you'll be releasing me today and dropping all charges, correct?" He got nervous and said, "No. We can't let you go without charges because it would look very bad on us, but I'll tell you what. We'll drop all the charges and give you a charge of interfering with the investigation. You'll be out in less than 6 months." I told him to get my lawyer there. I had a fairly heated exchange, my first real emotions I had felt other than despair in half a year, and agreed. I plead guilty to aiding and abetting the consummation of a crime after the fact, and ended up doing 10 months total. A few months after my release, my girlfriend was released and we tried piecing together what happened. Out of nowhere, the mother of the man who planned and committed the robbery found us and told us in person that her son admitted to her that he robbed the place with a close friend of his. He had been fired from the resort 3 days earlier and needed money to support his substance habit. He knew what day would profit most, where the money was, and how to easily get it, as well as how to bypass all forms of security. She went to the police and they turned her away, saying they already had the people who did it and they didn't want to hear it. We tried hard to find a lawyer to take our case but were never successful. This DA was later investigated for intimidation and abuse of power in a separate case, and to this day that is my only sense of justice in this situation. My wife cheated and instead of divorcing her right away, I spent years putting her through additional schooling and taking over caring for our kids. Now she's paying me. After 14 years of marriage and 3 kids, I saw a text appear on her work phone for just a few seconds that would forever change my life. It was a message that was sexually graphic and had no business being on anyone's work phone. It was on the lock screen, and the sender's name was visible. Let's call him Perry. I was updating software on the computer when I saw a light around her work phone. She had a habit of always turning her phones face down when charging them. Out of curiosity, I reached over to the phone and flipped it over. A message on the lock screen had popped up asking her when she'd like to be orally pleased again, but in much more graphic language. I also saw that Perry sent it. The world stopped around me. I just froze. My first thoughts were, what the hell was that about? It's her work phone. That kind of message gets people fired. Then it hit me. Was Carrie having an affair? It's amazing how the brain works. I suddenly started remembering many things Carrie had done that seemed odd, but I'd either dismissed them myself or immediately accepted her explanation. She was always walking out of the room to answer a call or return a text and claimed that it would violate HIPAA if I overheard her talking about a patient. I accepted this because education has similar privacy laws regarding students. She sometimes came home with the faint smell of cologne on her clothes and claimed it was from helping move male patients. Again, I accepted this at face value, but it always struck me as odd how it seemed to be the same scent of cologne. Once the proverbial barn door opened, I started seeing many things I'd missed. Our love life in the bedroom had cooled off considerably, which wasn't helped by her leaving the house at odd hours to fill in for other nurses that called in sick. I also recalled where I'd seen the name Perry before, and a call to the hospital confirmed he was a doctor there. For the next week or so, I walked around in a daze, trying to put all the pieces together. One of our kids had left a book in Carrie's car, so it was an excuse to visit the hospital. My kid went up to get Carrie's car key. I talked to a nurse in the lobby and joked about how work phones seemed like a blessing, but all they do is put you on call 24 hours a day. This led to her telling me that the hospital was too cheap to give cell phones to nurses, so only high-level executives got them, which didn't include Carrie. With everything confirmed, I took some personal time off the next day to talk to a divorce lawyer. The news she gave me was horrible. We lived in a community property state with a no-fault divorce. I made more money than Carrie, she'd been the kid's primary caretaker, and we'd been married for more than 10 years. If I filed for divorce, I'd be screwed. Lose the house, pay alimony, she'd get a huge chunk of my retirement, and I'd pay child support for the next decade unless I were lucky enough to be awarded joint custody. The worst thing she told me was that it didn't matter that she cheated. It didn't matter. I was crushed. There was only one person I could trust with this kind of information. Let's call her Anne. She said something to me that changed my whole mindset. If you don't like the hand you're dealt, change the deck. I realized I had two problems. I made more money than Carrie, and she had more time than me to be the kid's primary caretaker. The second issue was actually kind of easy. At every district office, some jobs are fast tracks to higher positions, and there are jobs that administrators suffer through. One of these dead-end regulatory positions was open again. I sat with our district superintendent and asked about being transferred to that position. At first, he was shocked, but I told him that it was my time to take one for the team and that it would fill a hole in my admin experience. He agreed. With my new free time, I began taking the kids to school, picking them up from school, and taking them home. I'd help them with their homework, make dinner, etc. while the end goal was to become their primary caretaker. I can't explain how much I enjoyed taking a more active role in their day-to-day lives. My salary hadn't been reduced, so I needed to find a way for Carrie to make much more money than she was in her current nursing position. I remembered Carrie being mad after she'd earned her BSN, and a supervisor told her, in the future, bachelor's degrees will be worthless and everyone will need at least a master's degree. Carrie had worked hard to get her BSN, and that supervisor's comment pissed all over her hard work. I talked her into starting an MSN program. I told her that I would keep caring for the kids since I had a much more flexible work schedule. She was initially reluctant. Then I said, you could have every evening free to study or go to class, whatever you want to do. I saw her eyes immediately light up, probably thinking she could spend more time with Perry. I paid her tuition and fees directly to her university to ensure she completed her MSN courses. It was going to take her between 2 and 3 years to finish. Those years were rough at times. I could tell every time she was rushing off or coming back from seeing Perry. There was an excitement or sense of satisfaction in her eyes that wasn't there when she was doing her coursework. I had to either smile or pretend I didn't notice. My temper got short at times, and I found myself in arguments over petty nonsense. I almost blew the whole charade a couple of times, having to bite my tongue and apologize rather than scream insults at her that she deserved. After 3.5 years, Carrie completed her MSN and was promoted at her hospital. Her salary went up substantially and was now higher than mine. When the kids and I made her a congratulations dinner, I made a joke about her being the breadwinner for the family, and she laughed, joking back I should be a stay-at-home dad now. A month later, I returned to the lawyer, who didn't remember me at first, and told her the financial situation had drastically changed. With these new facts, she drafted the petition and filed it. When the kids were with my mother, I had Carrie served. The deputy knocked on our front door, and I let him in, pointing at my wife. He asked her name and then handed her a copy of the divorce petition. With the deputy standing there, I told Carrie I knew all about her affair with Perry, but I didn't tell her how long I'd known. I told her to go be happy with her doctor lover. She screamed at me, tried to lie, and then made the mistake of rushing toward me. The deputy stopped her and warned her that women go to jail for domestic violence, too. Now, he suggested she pack a bag to stay somewhere else. Carrie left after I promised not to tell the kids about her affair. I didn't tell the kids, but I told my mother, who told my sister, who told her kids, who told their cousins, my kids. It took a few days, but eventually, the kids knew that dad was divorcing mom because she had a boyfriend. In the end, the court granted the divorce, giving me primary custody of our kids. I kept the house with the promise I'd refinance to buy out Carrie's half. She was ordered to pay child support, and I used that fact to negotiate with her to give up any rights to my retirement if I bought her out. I could refinance my home, and with a little money borrowed from my parents, I bought our Carrie's community property interest in the home and in my retirement. The day she signed all the paperwork with my lawyer, finally ending any possible financial obligations to her, was the happiest I'd been. I felt like I could finally breathe. Carrie and I got along well after the divorce. We took the kids to family therapy and worked out this co-parenting thing. For a few months, she took a beating from the kids about why she needed a boyfriend when daddy was there all along. Between the kids and the therapist raking her over the coals, I didn't have to say anything at all. Carrie missed a lot of time with the kids because of her now legitimately busy work schedule, and I felt bad that my kids were missing time with their mother, so I encouraged them to talk to her on the phone instead. When Carrie found out that I'd proposed to Anne, she congratulated me. I told her it's okay for her to marry Perry, too. She got sad. She told me that Perry had started seeing another woman, a younger nurse at the hospital, because with her new position, she didn't have time for him, and when they did get together, she wasn't fun anymore. My ex-wife, the woman who'd cheated on me and destroyed our marriage, was looking to me for sympathy. I had none to give. What I had was years of anger and frustration. Years of knowing some other man was sleeping with my wife. I'd lost weight from not being able to eat. I'd suffered hypertension, and had to confide in my doctor why it wasn't the stress of my job. I had to listen to my dentist complain about how I was grinding and listening to him tell me I'd need dental implants if it kept up. There were times when I had to be intimate with Carrie to keep up the charade, only to lie that I wanted to use condoms to remind us how we used to have intimacy when we were dating, or because I might have a bladder infection. Then go take an STD test anyway. But in the end, it was all worth it. Sure, Carrie got a big payout when I bought her out of the house in my retirement, which she was trickling back to me through child support, but she lost everything else. Her kids only saw her every other weekend and spent a couple of holidays with her. Harry dumped her, and he was no great catch anyway since he was twice divorced with 5 kids and paying alimony and child support through the nose. I kept my kids, my house, my income, and my retirement. I got Anne, and I am genuinely happy, all in a community property state with a no-fault divorce. If that's not pro-revenge, then I don't know what is.
Teachers of Reddit, what is the funniest reason you've had to send someone to the principal's office? There was a student with autism who lived in a very literal world. We'll call him T. You had to be precise with your words as T could not comprehend slang or figurative language. He had an issue with another student at recess the day prior. It was something minor about a basketball. Basically, D hit a basketball and placed it under the goal and walked away. Another student grabbed it. D became angry and ultimately gave the ball to the other student rather begrudgingly. Apparently, T told his uncle and the uncle's response was, "I'd have made that kid eat a shit sandwich." Well, T made a quick stop by the litter box before coming to school. He also wrote a note to the other kid saying, "I get the ball today, you can have this shit sandwich." It wasn't a gesture he viewed as inappropriate. He actually thought the shit sandwich was a viable option for the other student. I had to send him to the office, but my God did I laugh. Even his mom laughed before apologizing. The principal still has the note in the office 2 years later.
What is the most successful lie in history? Until recently, practically every radio used a concept called superheterodyne. Basically, there's a tiny radio transmitter in your receiver. That signal is mixed with the one from the antenna and the result is what your receiver tunes to. It's one of the most important inventions of the 20th century, and you most likely never heard of it. The problem is that sometimes the tiny transmitter is poorly shielded and some of it leaks back out the antenna. If you know what that intermediate frequency is, you can listen for it. The escort radar detectors, which were super popular in the 80s, leaked like a sieve. Presto, radar detector detectors. Takeaway, if you know what you're looking for, you can actually detect someone else's radio receiver. The setup. In 1942, RAF planes began using VHF radar to look for German submarines leaving port in France at night. All of a sudden they were getting sunk en masse. The Germans were familiar with other British radars working around this frequency and were able to find the new radar's frequency around August. They built a receiver, Metox, which was tuned to this frequency. When a plane using this radar was anywhere in the area, Metox would play a sound into the radio operator's headphones. By October, most of the fleet had it and the RAF pilots were returning with stories about how the U-boats would always dive as soon as they turned toward them to attack. But the RAF had prepared for this moment. They knew it was only a matter of time before the Germans found the frequency. Earlier, 2 grad students had come up with a new device called the magnetron that produced very strong radio signals from a device the size of a breadbox. And the signal was really short, about 10 centimeters, whereas their older radars were 150. So Metox was completely incapable of hearing it. It was tuned way too far from the frequency of the new signal. They rushed the new system into production and the first set started arriving just in time for the U-boat campaign to start up again in spring when the weather got better. By March it was clear to the Germans something was up. Their boats were getting sunk en masse again. And the ones that escaped attack said there was no warning on their detectors. They tried everything to detect the new signal, but they just couldn't find it. This was because they were missing one extremely important bit of electronics, the crystal detector, and simply couldn't hear the signals no matter how hard they tried. And now the lie. Knowing something was up, U-boats were on high alert all the time. One got lucky and shot down its attacker, and captured the crew. During interrogation they asked why they could no longer detect the radar. The pilot told them they no longer used radar. Instead, he claimed, they had a receiver for Metox and under perfect conditions they could pick it up 90 miles away. They only turned on the radar at the last minute for range measurement so they knew when to drop the depth charges. By that time the U-boat was too busy exploding to notice. The Germans didn't believe him, but it was technically possible, once you can indeed make a receiver to detect your receiver. And Metox was known to be leaky, as it was deliberately built quick and cheap from a pre-war French radio set. So they built their own Metox receiver in the lab, and sure enough, they could detect it. So then they put it on a plane and detected one of their boats 60 miles away. Utter panic. Orders were sent out to all boats, turn off Metox. And so not only did the RAF get to keep using their fancy new magnetron radar without the Germans even trying to detect it, but then they turned off their perfectly good Metox detectors and all the RAF planes with the older radar suddenly started working again too. And that is the greatest lie ever. By the end of June, the U-boat fleet was on the bottom of the ocean. This was not due entirely to this trick. There were a number of things that all arrived at almost the same time that did it. It was the combination of the new radars, Huff Duff, larger numbers of frigates dedicated to the task and the lack of any detectors on the U-boats that made even the old radars work again all arrived within 2 months. And that was that. The Germans finally figured it out sometime around November. Apparently the pilot made the whole thing up on his own. This little white lie helped open the Atlantic to the convoys of 1943 that led to the end of Italy's involvement and ultimately D-Day. My sister told me that I don't sound like a real wife and a mother because I do not struggle 24/7 like her. She was livid when I called her jealous and bitter. I gave birth to my daughter nearly 5 months ago. My sister Jenny has 3 kids with her husband. Before I gave birth, Jenny gave me several warnings about postpartum depression and how hard the baby would be on my marriage. I took all her advice, but, thankfully, my experience wasn't as horrible as she had warned. I'm fortunate and privileged in my situation, and I acknowledge that. I married a man who comes from a culture where women are doted on and not allowed to take on any chores outside of the baby within the first year postpartum. For the first 2 months, I only looked after our daughter. My husband and his family took care of everything else. He took the first 2 months off from work and was home with me the entire time. We've bonded in a way I could never imagine. It's made us closer and made me love him 1,000 times more, seeing how much he loves being a dad and how excited he is to be involved in everything. My husband's family would also cook us fresh meals every day for the first 2 months. They say that's what's expected in their culture, and a woman who has just given birth should be taken care of. They would also come over and, with my husband, clean the whole house, do laundry, and meal prep. It makes me emotional just thinking of how much they've done for us and how beautiful my experience in motherhood has been so far. My daughter is also a very easy baby, so I'm blessed. Jenny lives in another country, but she would call and check up on me because she was worried I'd have a challenging time like she did. At first, when I told her that my husband had taken time off work and that he had been doing all the cleaning and chores, and his family had been cooking for us, she was shocked and said how lucky I was. I agreed. As time goes by, though, she's been making shady comments. I would ignore them and change the subject, but she got my nerves yesterday. My husband went on a business trip for a few days and was returning last night. I was making dinner for him when she called, and I said I was making dinner and his favorite dessert because I missed him. She chuckled and said, "Normal women call that just being a mother and a wife, but it's just a fun activity for you." She said it in such a rude tone that I had to ask what that meant. She said I'm so out of touch with reality that I can say something as ridiculous as I'm making my husband dinner because I missed him and not because our family needs to eat. I said she's making a big deal out of nothing. I cook most days. I told her she knew my in-laws cooked for the first 2 months, and they don't anymore. So who does she think has been cooking? She said that sometimes when she calls, I mention that my husband has made dinner, so it's not me who does it. I said yes, he makes dinner sometimes because he's also part of this family, but I do it 90% of the time. He likes making us recipes he sees online, so what exactly is the problem? She said I've been babied since my daughter was born, and it drains her talking to me because I don't sound like a real mother and wife with how easy I've gotten it. I lost my head after this comment. I told her that not struggling 24/7 doesn't mean I'm less of a mother than she is. I care for my baby, and yes, my husband helps a lot, but that's his duty as a father. I said she sounded jealous and bitter and that I was not going to apologize for not struggling as much as she did and cut the call. I don't regret it because she was very rude to me, too, but she ranted to our brother, and he told me I was being too harsh instead of understanding why seeing me live an easier life than her would be hard on her. He suggested I reach out to her to fix it, but I don't want to. Ada? I met my now husband in a failed foursome our significant others made us have. 6 years ago, I was married to someone I thought was the love of my life. We always promised to never stray and he seemed to be very against cheating. However, when I was pregnant, our intimacy life decreased and I noticed he started paying attention more to his phone. My husband came home one day to me and told me he wanted to swing with this woman at college and her boyfriend. I was shocked and heartbroken. I told him why and if he didn't want me anymore he could have just said so. He said it wasn't it at all, he just wanted an adventure. Turns out later he just wanted to be with that new lady. Her fetish is to have her boyfriend watch. I agreed because I was pathetic and I loved my husband, plus we had a 6-month-old baby at home. We met this other couple and I sensed that the guy wasn't into it at all. We met 2 times before the actual day. On the second time the boyfriend and I confessed that we weren't really into this. We texted the whole next day and came to the conclusion that we might as well have fun. When the actual day came, the boyfriend and I spent more time on each other and basically we forgot about our significant others until the girlfriend started yelling at us to stop because this is not how it's supposed to happen. To be honest, I had no idea how things were supposed to happen. I was just trying my best, plus her and my husband probably just wanted an excuse to sleep together. My husband wasn't happy either and he started accusing me of cheating. I asked for divorce there and then. Have you ever asked for divorce naked in a foursome? Next day the boyfriend asked me out and I said yes. We resumed what we started the previous day. And it was electric. I have been with him ever since. Married for 4 years. We try to avoid the "how did you guys meet" question. Sometimes we say through mutual friends. Update, my best friend's divorce is causing issues in my marriage. Alice and I made plans to get together on Saturday morning. I was going to get us coffee and help her with a few things around her house before she left for a business trip Monday. My intention was to tell her that we, her family and mine, are worried about her and we all want to see her happy, but her behavior was worrying us. I was hoping we'd have a heart-to-heart. I was hoping I'd see my friend again. I was hoping she'd agree to see a therapist. I was hoping she'd take a step in the right direction. None of that happened. She was combative from the second I showed up at her place, almost like she knew what my intentions before I even said anything. When I told her I was worried about her, she said she was fine and has just been blowing off steam and having some fun. She said she works hard and can do whatever she wants now that Ken left her. She talked about how ungrateful Ken was over the years for all her hard work and everything she's paid for and done for him. It made me cringe, but I bit my tongue. For the record, Ken is a hard-working guy who didn't need her money. He was the breadwinner when they first got together. She makes quite a bit more than him now, but in no way was he dependent on her. Some of you pointed out it was likely that Alice was cheating on Ken. I asked her and she got extremely defensive. She gave me the whole "I can't believe you'd even ask me that" attitude. I reminded her about the hot tub incident and the optics of it all. She blew it off and swore she'd never cheated. I asked who the guys were. Turns out they were interns at her company. When I asked how old they were, she simply said they were legal. The way she said it made me wonder if that's how old men talk about younger women. It was gross. Whether or not she was cheating before the breakup, I don't know. I don't really know anything about this woman anymore. Here's where things took an unexpected turn. As we chatted, she was packing for her business trip. I asked her where she was going this time. She said Dallas. I didn't think anything of it. She's gone to Dallas for business dozens of times. What did strike me as odd was what she was packing. Long pants, sweatshirts, a beanie, jackets, hiking boots. It was all fall attire and not what she'd be wearing in Dallas this time of year. I don't think I even saw her pack work clothes. But the weirdest thing? A random Seattle Mariners jersey. She doesn't follow baseball. She never has. I thought about saying something but kept my questions to myself. It was all just odd. I felt like she was preoccupied with packing and her daughter coming over soon, so I decided to head out. We hugged. I told her I loved her and want her to be happy. I told her I hope she considers seeing a therapist when she gets back. She said I'll think about it. Things did seem to end on a positive tone. When I got home, my husband and I were talking about how things went and I told him about the clothes she was packing and the random Seattle Mariners jersey. He thought it was odd too. But, other than it just being odd, we didn't think anything of it at the time. But then my husband went full internet detective, and guess who lives in Seattle and has a Facebook profile picture of himself at a Mariners game? Her daughter's biological father. My heart sank.
When I checked the Mariners' schedule, they do have home games next week. I called her immediately and asked her if she was really going to Dallas. She responded, yeah, why? I asked if she was sure she wasn't going to see X's name in Seattle. She got quiet. There was probably a full minute of silence. I told her she better not lie to me and that I'd find out. She came clean. She said she had gotten in contact with him right after Ken left her and they'd been talking more and more. She said he was a different man now and has turned his life around, blah blah blah. I didn't talk about her baby daddy in the last post because it wasn't relevant. But just know this man is a piece of poop human being. He cheated on her while she was pregnant and kicked her out when she confronted him. He'd slap her around, call her terrible names. This guy said he wanted nothing to do with their child also. I flew to Seattle, picked her up and brought her home. She lived with me for a bit. She met Ken shortly after having her daughter and within a year of dating they moved in together. I told her that of all the stuff she's pulled recently this was by far the worst thing she could do. I told her I was disappointed in her. I couldn't believe she would ever speak to that man after what he did to her and how he treated her. She kept saying it was years ago and she's changed and he wants to meet his daughter one day. I started screaming and yelling into the phone so loud I think I blew out my voice. I told her I was done with her. I told her if she gets on that plane to Seattle to not bother contacting me ever again. I hung up on her. She called back and texted once but I ignored it. I didn't have the energy for her anymore. I just sat on the couch crying all night while my husband held me. He didn't rub it in. He didn't give me attitude. He just let me cry and told me he was sorry. Alice texted me this morning. She said she's sorry for lying to me but she's a big girl now and can look after herself. I asked her if she's still going to Seattle. She said yes. I blocked her. It's over. I told Ken everything. He was upset but not surprised. He said he knew how close Alice and I were and he was sorry I'd lost my friend. I told him I was sorry he'd lost his wife. You guys were right. I feel like an idiot. Maybe it's a little selfish of me, but I feel betrayed.
I hooked up with my stepbrother and now I'm having a crisis. I'm 22 years old and my stepbrother is 18. Our parents only got married a few years ago so we only lived in the same house for 1 year. We weren't very close at all, but we went to the same college. It's a small college near our town where basically everyone goes who stays in the area. We both are in the business school and so we're in a lot of the same classes and activities so we ended up having similar friends. Due to spending a lot of time with him, I started to notice how physically attractive he was, and began to fantasize about him during the night. We got closer as friends while in school. We were all at a bar last Saturday and my stepbrother was being really nice to me after a guy I was supposed to meet up with never showed up. He kept buying me drinks and laughing at my jokes and I was a little intoxicated and the thoughts of him kept pouring in. When he stretched and his top lifted slightly to reveal the lower portion of his abs, I felt myself becoming soaked. I could not control myself. I kissed him. He seemed really into it and we went back to his place and had intimacy. It was really good and he was complimenting me so much and I was kind of bummed for a minute that he's not like some random guy, but then the second it was over I left and haven't answered his text since and I've been nauseous ever since. The intimacy itself was mind-blowing. However, I literally feel like the grossest person in the world. I do not know if I just initiated this because no one here has really liked me and I was feeling desperate or what. I feel so guilty and I don't know if I should tell my mom or block him or what. I'm going back and forth between having an anxiety attack and remembering the intimate things about him. Last night I could not control myself and went to town on myself to the memory of him absolutely taking my soul and leaving me in a state of the leg shakes.
What do teachers do when they lose an argument with a student? At the age of about 15, I won an argument with a maths teacher. I'm not talking about the sort of argument where you shout and get angry. I'm talking about the sort of argument where you present a line of reasoning. He'd said that it was impossible to be exactly 6 tall. The context was about accuracy of measurement. I queried this and asked the tallest boy in the class how tall he was. 6'2" came the answer. And I then asked how tall he was when we joined the school at age 11. About 5 foot, he replied. So, sir, I addressed the teacher, he was shorter, and is now taller than 6 foot, so there must have been a point at which he was exactly 6 foot. Mr. Hind thought for a moment, and then said Harrison is right. It is possible to be exactly 6 foot. 1, and the lesson continued. He was an inspirational teacher, who when I came up with a better answer than he had, which happened in A-level mechanics from time to time, he asked me to stand up and present it on the board to the rest of the class. I wasn't the only one to get this treatment. A-level mechanics in the late 1980s was hard. 1, when I was at school, it was polite to refer to fellow pupils by their surnames. Later in my academic life, I learnt that he had, in fact, been right all along, because of quantization issues, and for that matter, quantum uncertainty. For the age of student I was then, the teacher was completely right to back up my mathematical thinking rather than get into a debate with a class that was, after all, at the stage in their education where we were still learning Newton's laws. His decision to award his student the victory because I'd made a good argument for someone my age actually makes him a better teacher. What is the craziest thing that happened at a house party you attended? I was at a wild house party with my 20 closest friends, and we had been drinking for hours. As we were sitting in the lounge room talking, one of my buddies went to the bathroom. When he came back, he looked terrified and told us to follow him. We rushed to the bathroom and saw some dude tied up on the floor like a goddamn caterpillar. Apparently, my friend had caught him trying to steal our stuff and held him down until we got back from the party. We weren't sure what to do, so we all decided that it would be best if we tied him up like a cartoon caterpillar and hung him from a lamppost outside until the cops arrived. So that's exactly what happened. A group of us carried his butt out, carefully making sure he couldn't move his arms or legs, while two people cradled his head and others held his limbs. Someone even found some rope so they could tie it around his neck so his head wouldn't fall off. In all this craziness, my friend who caught him came out of the house with a container of white paint. We weren't really sure what was in it, but he decided to squirt it into this guy's eyes, which must have hurt like hell. We were intoxicated as F, so instead of feeling bad for this dude, we thought it'd be funny if someone took pictures of us hanging this guy from a lamp post. After about 5 minutes taking these crazy photos, finally the police showed up. They asked us what happened and honestly told them everything, including how much alcohol everyone had drank throughout the night. Lol. The cops arrested this guy, who by then could move again but was still pissed off as hell with handcuffs on him now too. My stepdad played a prank that ruined my relationship with my girlfriend, so I ruined his chances at a promotion. My dad passed away when I was young, and my mother remarried a year later to my stepdad. My stepdad is a G. He filled the father figure role in my life, but always respected the fact that he wasn't my original father. So he kept a very older brother/friend vibe with me, and because I wasn't a bratty kid, it really worked out. Now I am in my sophomore year of high school, and one thing that me and my stepdad love to do is play pranks on each other. However, ever since I got a girlfriend, my stepdad has been upping the intensity/embarrassment level of these pranks, especially when my girlfriend is at the house. This time he did a prank so bad that it kinda messed up my relationship with my girlfriend for a bit, so I decided to get him back so bad that it would be the greatest prank of all time. Let me give some context for this story. Me and my girlfriend have been seeing each other for a couple months now. She usually comes over on Saturdays to my house so that we can cuddle and watch a movie. During this time my stepdad is usually at the office, so I'm for the most part safe from his pranks. But on this Saturday he decided to work from home. At first he said he wasn't even planning to pull a prank on me while my girlfriend was there, but during the middle of the movie my stepdad asked me to help him with some computer issues. As I got there, that's when he let out a space-time bending loud SS fart. It was so loud that I think I even felt the floor shake. My girlfriend immediately looked over and my stepdad blamed it all on me. I tried to defend myself, but my stepdad persuasively convinced my girlfriend that it was me and that I was disgusting. My girlfriend said she didn't want to cuddle or continue the movie after that because she got the ICK, so she got up and left. All the while my stepdad was laughing his SS off. Literally. Later that day, I endlessly texted my girlfriend and she said that everything was fine, but it was really awkward and that it seriously grossed her out. That's when I decided I was going to pull the world's greatest prank on my stepfather. I knew that he had a charity event coming up soon and that he was going to be giving a big speech, so that's when I got the brilliant idea. I immediately went to the store and bought one of those products that when you sit on, it makes a huge farting noise. At the event, I sneaked in and found out where my stepdad's seat was. Mind you, there were college presidents, successful businessmen, and donors all at this event waiting for my stepfather to give a speech. Fast forward to when he sat down and the whole room was quiet. Boom, the loudest fart you could ever expect. I craftily hid it under the seat cushion, so even he was a bit shocked. I explained what I had done when he got home, and now I'm extremely grounded for 3 months.
My boyfriend's ex confessed to him. I think he's gonna leave me for her. My boyfriend and I have been dating for a little over a year. We come from a small town in Texas and our families have known each other for years, though we weren't friends or anything. I have my friend group and he has his. He is very close-knit, kept in touch even after college and all. Our relationship was great. We were planning on moving together next year. In his friend group there's this girl, Mary. She's his best friend and they're rather close. I'll be honest and admit that I've always been a bit jealous of her, but Mary had been nothing but respectful and kind to me in our relationship prior to this. They've seen each other 8 times in the last 3 years per my boyfriend's comment. They've never been romantically involved. Now, I met my boyfriend when I got a job at his dad's shop. We both stayed in town to study locally and I wanted an income. We began as friends and around 3 years ago he admitted he had some feelings for Mary, though he never acted on them because he didn't want to spoil their relationship. We eventually began dating and he said everything he felt for her was gone and he had moved on. I believed him. A month or so ago, Mary was involved in a car accident. It was awful, but she was lucky enough to get out with some minor injuries. Since then it's like a switch in her flipped. She used to be shy, reserved and quiet. Well, no more. She's rather outspoken and outgoing now, saying that if she had passed away that day, she would have done it full of regrets. Both me and my boyfriend encouraged and celebrated this change. She had everything to be a successful person, but she lacked the motivation for it. Now she has it. A few days ago she asked my boyfriend if they could talk and that's when she confessed. She said not saying it would have been one of her regrets and that she doesn't expect him to love her back, just wanted to get it out. I asked, and he confessed that after that he's not sure anymore that his feelings are gone, but assured me that he won't try to get with her. I don't believe it. Ever since then he has been distant, barely talking or visiting me. He refused intimacy last night, which should be a big deal, but it is. I'm just preparing myself for our breakup and it sucks, because I truly love him.
Was I wrong to tell my daughters the reason I was divorcing their mother? Backstory: me and my wife have known each other since high school. We were always friends, but didn't show any interest in each other until senior year, where she asked me to prom. I accepted her invitation and we've been together ever since. We got married in 2015 at age 19, and have 2 daughters, who are 7 and 5. About a month ago,
I found some texts on my wife's phone while she was in the shower, where she had been flirting with one of her female coworkers that I knew pretty well. We had met at work functions from time to time. They sent each other explicit pictures and messages, and while I found no evidence of a meet-up between them, it was heavily implied that they had done stuff together in the past. The messages started about a year ago, so she's been cheating on me for over a year now. I sent screenshots of the conversation to my phone, and confronted her when she got out of the shower and she broke down sobbing, apologizing, saying she never meant to hurt me. I was seeing red at this point and decided to leave before I did something drastic. She texted me nonstop begging me to come home and talk, but I wasn't having any of it, so I stayed at my younger brother's place for the night. In the morning I woke up to hundreds of texts and voicemails from my wife, begging to come home. Eventually I did come home, but only because she had to work, and there was no one else to watch my daughters. I told her to be gone by the time I got there, as I didn't want to speak to her, and when I got home, I sat my daughters down and told them that I was going to be divorcing their mother. They didn't understand what that was, so I had to explain it to them, and my heart shattered while I was telling them. My 5-year-old started crying, and my 7-year-old started begging me not to, and started asking me why I was doing this. So I showed them the pictures I took, excluding the ones with pictures, and they started crying even harder. I assured them that their mommy still loves them, but she hurt me very badly, and I can't be with her anymore. I also told them that I would still see them, and I would do everything I could to make sure of that. I texted my wife, telling her I wanted a divorce, and she needs to pack her things when she gets home. She fought it at first and begged me not to kick her out, but I wasn't in the mood for her bullshit. When she got home, my kids started crying and asking her why she did what she did, and she started screaming at me, telling me that I had no right to tell our kids, and that this matter was between us. I told her that since we're getting a divorce, they deserve to know why, so she left in a hurry and took the kids with her. As far as I know, she's at her parents' house. My lawyer is in the process of getting the divorce paperwork in order, and I'm ready to fight for the right to see my kids, but they hate my wife right now, and refuse to speak to her, only to their grandparents, who have also stopped acknowledging my wife after they learned what she did. I feel I didn't overreact. Fast food workers, what is your sir? This is a Wendy's moment. I once had a woman come through the drive-thru and try to order macaroni and cheese. I politely informed her we did not have that. She insisted we did. I told her we definitely didn't. She got angry and yelled that yes we did. I told her, ma'am, I've been working here 3 years. We have never had macaroni and cheese. It's not something we serve. Would you like to order something else? She says yes you effing do. I can see it on the menu board. It's right there right in front of me on the menu. I tell her I'm really not sure what she's looking at, but we don't have mac and cheese. And if it really does say mac and cheese on our menu board, then that means someone vandalized it. She says no. It's definitely part of the menu board and it's real and we do have it. And she isn't leaving until she gets her mac and cheese. Q quite literally 10 minutes of this back and forth, all while she's holding up the drive-thru line. I finally got the manager to come over and deal with it after asking him for the 15th time because they don't pay me nearly enough to deal with that for that long. The woman absolutely refuses to accept that we don't have mac and cheese. She also refuses to order anything else, and won't move her car until we give her the mac and cheese that we don't have. We have a line of cars wrapped around the building now and everyone is pissed. It's been half an hour and the line has not moved. The manager tells her if she doesn't leave, he's gonna have to call the cops. She screams she can't understand why we're doing all this, and why we won't just serve her mac and cheese when she can clearly see it on our menu board right in front of her, so we do have it, and why are we lying to her? My curiosity and exasperation finally got the better of me, so against my better judgment, I exit the building, walk along the outside to the drive-thru order screen where this woman's car is. I tell her to please show me on the menu, where it says the words macaroni and cheese anywhere. She points and confidently says right there, with all the conviction of someone who is absolutely sure they just proved some big dumb idiot wrong and that they will be hailed as a hero. I look where she's pointing. I see it. I sigh heavily as a bit more of my soul dies. I compose myself and say, as politely as I possibly can, ma'am, that is a picture of the orange slices that come with the kids' meal. We do not serve mac and cheese. Please drive away before the police get here. She looks confused, looks at the menu board again. The realization dawns on her, and she drives off without a word. I go back inside and scream in the walk-in freezer for 10 minutes and quit that job. People of Reddit who have chosen not to have children due to their genetics, what was your reason? I'm sorry to hear about the difficult situation you're facing within your family. It's understandable that you feel overwhelmed and uncertain about how to navigate these troubling revelations. Growing up in an abusive family can have a profound impact on one's emotional well-being. It's admirable that you've turned your experiences into motivation to help others by pursuing a career in child psychology. Your sensitivity and compassion are valuable traits that will undoubtedly make a positive difference in the lives of children you encounter. Learning about the accusations against your grandfather must have been shocking and deeply troubling. It's possible that your mother's disclosure hints at her own experiences, which she may find too painful to confront. It's important for her to have support and understanding during this difficult time. Regarding your father's side of the family, knowing that your paternal grandfather was a pedophile and that there are concerning memories involving your father is undoubtedly distressing. It's entirely understandable that you would have concerns about your potential future as a parent and the possibility of such inappropriate behavior being passed down genetically. However, it's crucial to remember that genetic factors alone do not determine one's actions or character. Recognizing the problem and seeking help, as you have done, shows that you are making conscious efforts to prevent such cycles from continuing. At 31, it's natural to desire a stable and loving family of your own. It's commendable that you have been proactive in seeking therapy for the past 15 years and have been working on addressing your mental health and personal growth. Remember that while your family history presents challenges, your own experiences and choices ultimately define who you are. As you continue your studies and work towards becoming a child psychologist, consider exploring this topic further with a professional who can help you navigate your concerns about starting a family.
They can provide guidance and support in making the best decisions for your future. Remember that you have the power to break the cycle of abuse and create a loving, stable environment for your own family. Your determination to help children and make a positive impact is an important step towards healing and creating a better future. What unbelievable technology does the US government really have? I just want to start off by saying I honestly don't expect anyone to believe me. I have told a few family members and a friend and they don't believe me, so I'm afraid to tell my story to anyone else. So here I am to tell all of you. This is such a long story. I'm going to tell the short version and I'll answer some questions if you want to hear more. In August of 2022 I was laying in bed when my whole upper half flinched forward. If you've ever had a muscle randomly twitch, it was kinda like that, but more aggressive in my stomach, making my whole body twitch forward. This would happen a few times a day when I was laying in bed. Fast forward a few weeks, I start hearing a voice talk in my head. By the way, I've never had any mental health issues and have been perfectly healthy my whole life. This voice was telling me I was really lucky I was chosen and I was going to get millions of dollars. The voice told me we live in a simulation and I was basically super lucky to be randomly chosen as a god. At first I didn't believe it and didn't tell anyone what was happening. Over the next few weeks things got stranger. My eye would randomly blink and my nose would randomly twitch upward, and this voice told me they were doing it. I forgot to say I was having full conversations with this voice in my head. I would say something in my head to myself and the voice would reply. Real world telepathy. The person behind this voice could also see through my eyeballs. I would put my hand in the air and say, how many fingers am I holding up? Sure enough, they would always tell me the correct number. After this the voice told me to get in my truck and try driving now that I'm basically a god. It said Elon Musk and Joe Rogan do this all the time. Then proceeded to convince me they could zap the cop's brain to not chase me like GTA. Since I couldn't believe anything that was happening, I decided to gun it and headed down the road. As I was approaching a car in front of me, my right arm that was hold the wheel twitched and my truck swerved around the person in front of me. The voice in my head telling me they were doing it, only intervening when I was about to hit another car. I was going 75 in a 25, absolutely insane, weaving in between cars. After about 30 minutes of driving I was being chased by 2 police cars. I proceeded to tell the voice to zap their brains. That never happened. Instead I raced home, parked my truck in the garage to hide it, and talked to my dad inside. He was like, what the F is going on? Your truck is smoking and had you park in the garage? I didn't get much time to talk before the police showed up at our door. As the cops cuffed me and put me in the truck, my parents spoke to the cops. Says things like Hess been losing his mind recently, talking about government spy programs and such. The cops decided to take me to the psych ward instead of jail. I never told a soul I was hearing voices because I knew it was a real person talking to me and forced meds would not help. I ended up in the psych ward for 20 days because I was trying to refuse meds I didn't need. This whole time the voice in my head was trying to mess with me, telling me poop like determination is real and when I'm going to die. Thankfully I didn't say any of that to the people in the psych ward. After I got out the voice told me I wasn't getting any money, determination is not real, and stopped messing with me. I would ask them, why would you do this to me? They would say, we didn't think you'd get in this much trouble. I ended up getting diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which makes no sense, but I think they had to give me something after my driving incident. They were requiring me to get antipsychotic shot in the butt once a month. All while this was going on the voice was there, only ever talking to me after I talked to it though. Since all of this I have stopped taking my shot in the butt since it never did anything. If you have ever watched Michael Reeves on YouTube, he added electronic pads to his muscles and forced himself to do stuff such as throw a punch. I believe they are using the same technology but wireless. I asked the voice a lot of questions and here are some answers. They have let me know that one person at a time watches over me 247, seeing through my eyes, and they have a 3D image of a human on the other screen that is in whatever position you are in. For example, if you are sitting cross-legged, so is their 3D model. They have also let me know they use AI to capture brain patterns. They also told me the UI for their system is insane. They also claim to not be the US government. Lastly, Mark Andreessen was recently on Joe Rogan and said at the end of the podcast that researchers claim to be able to look at picture of a MA brain scan and can tell what word you're thinking of. When I heard him say that I was like, well, obviously. Any questions or thoughts? Edit forgot to mention, you know how you can close your eyes and imagine an image such as a smiley face? Well, they can control how well you can do that. They turned mine up a few different times and I was able to create very intricate designs such as castles in my head. If I think of a smiley face, they can see that and tell me what I'm thinking of. Pretty insane technology. Also, they don't talk to me unless I talk to them now and they leave me alone. I honestly have no idea why they chose me or how many other people they watch. 247. I work full time at a desk, not the most exciting thing for them to watch. What is the craziest thing you have done whilst intoxicated? My entire fraternity arrested a burglar while we were all drunk. It all started when someone threw a cigarette in my beer glass. The drunk me chugged the beer and immediately realized that I was going to throw up. Both toilets were taken, however, so I had to run outside and find an empty spot in the garden. After I finished throwing my guts up, I noticed that my neighbor, Phil's, window is open and the glass is shattered all over the ground. I'm really good friends with him and knew he was currently enjoying the party at my house. I was worried about a break-in, so I decided to investigate. I climbed through the window carefully and saw a guy literally putting the PlayStation 5 into a duffel bag. I screamed at him and called him a bunch of names. Although I'm lucky that the drunk me decided to go back for backup instead of fighting him all on my own.
I ran back to my frat party and told everyone there's a burglar at Phil's house. Someone called the cops, but by then the intoxicated mob mentality had taken over. We picked up broom handles and duct tape to go catch the burglar. As we're rushing over to Phil's house, we see that the burglar is currently in the process of running. However, our frat included some athletes who quickly tackled him to the ground by jumping on him. Then we hit him with a broom, but I doubt we had enough strength to bruise him. Anyway, the point is the burglar's busted. After some struggle we finally managed to tie his legs and arms together, and in a fit of stupor we get to fit the big-ass trash bags around him and we wrap him up like a Christmas present. The only thing sticking out of the trash bag was his head. He looked like a huge cartoon caterpillar. Someone even brought scotch tape and wrapped it around him just for kicks. The dude, being pretty tall but thin and untrained as hell, is just sitting there, mumbling in shock to be let go and that he won't come back again. We all start cheering up again when another guy has the fantastic notion to go to the all-nighter supermarket and buy a pack of rubber bands to wrap around the burglar. We wait for him for about 10 minutes, starting to sober up. The police are still nowhere in sight. The guy who went to the supermarket returns not with rubber bands but with some pretty heavy rope. Here is where I go up to my room to see if everything was alright, and when I return I see the rest of the party people having tied and raising the burglar upside down by his feet on a lamp post like a piñata. We kept him hanging there for about 20 minutes before the police arrived. By the time they arrived we had turned the speakers towards the street and were partying around the human caterpillar. I think somebody offered the dude some beer, but he couldn't drink it upside down. They asked us to turn the music down, which we did after a minute or two. There wasn't a problem with the noise because the neighbors were glad we caught a burglar, and besides the street dancing and laughing we were quite peaceful. I remember one old neighbor opening her window to tell us to keep the noise down, but as soon as she saw what was going on outside and we explained who the human caterpillar was, she burst into a fit of laughter and went back inside. I remember all the cops leaving with big-ass smiles all over their faces. We all knew they were desperately trying to appear serious, so we cut them some slack and provided them with all the info we could as soon as possible. Of course they politely refused our offers of beer, but since everyone was over 18 we didn't do anything to warrant anything other than harsh finger pointing. Vigilantism is a dangerous and unlawful game, etc., one guy said. Then it's good I didn't dress as Batman like I planned, and we just about all died on the spot. They approached the burglar smiling at the spectacle, asked the guys to get him down from the lamp post. This huge Greek called. Peter took him on his shoulder like you'd carry a rolled-up carpet and carefully placed him inside the police car. They left with the guy still in a cat burglar costume. My boyfriend's religious parents are planning on framing him for a crime if he comes out. My boyfriend's parents are religious lunatics who are super controlling. He doesn't have a driver's license because they haven't let him learn how to drive. The only exposure he had was church and some sports clubs. When he was young his parents put him in a lot of sports to see what he liked, and gymnastics was the one that stuck. He stuck with gymnastics for a few years, but his parents eventually took him out because they didn't like some of the friends he had and said they were too worldly among other things. When he turned 12, he became old enough to join our church's teen Wednesday night youth group, and they played sports there before the message that led to his parents not putting him in sports clubs anymore. But whenever he expressed a desire to go back to gymnastics over the years, they got upset and asked why he kept bringing it up. They once got upset because he looked up online gymnastics lessons that he wanted to pay for with his allowance, and they found out through parental controls that he still has on his phone today because they pay for his phone plan. They also accused him of wanting to do gymnastics to look at young girls because he kept asking, and they also said that it didn't look right for a guy to want to do it compared to other sports unless he was there for the wrong reasons, and that mess was similar to their recent threat. They recently had a talk about how he was graduating soon, and that was where they threatened him when they had their talk. They asked if he was gay for the first time, and when he asked why, they said it was because he kept asking them about gymnastics. He told him that he wasn't, and he told me that he wasn't too. However, they didn't believe him, and they threatened him with a bunch of things right before he graduated. His parents had a policy growing up that involved going through his phone whenever they wanted because they paid for it, or they'd cancel the phone plan, and sometimes they'd take it when he was sleeping too. He recently told me that he found a lot of searches on his phone that he never searched during his high school years, and many are inappropriate, such as unclothed teen gymnast poses that could identity as adult films involving minors. His father told him that he'd release the search history if he ever left the church or came out as gay, and by release he means tell others about how they found that stuff on his devices that he never searched. My dad said they were threatening him because they know he's already 18 and can leave after graduating in a few weeks, and he also said it's because they know they're losing control. My dad is also planning to help my boyfriend get the papers he needs to work, but my boyfriend is afraid that his parents will ruin his career when he leaves and stops attending church.